let's everyone go. Perfect.
Jesus Christ, my frames.
So
Unknown soldier.
changing the run. Oh, sorry.
They're all here, First Sergeant.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to get today started. A little bit fucking late, which isn't great, but luckily for you guys, today's a pretty simple day for you. So first thing we're going to be doing is heading over to the vehicle PID course, take you guys through some of the vehicles you're commonly going to see. Not going to go through every single vehicle you're potentially going to see downrange, but we'll cover the ones you're commonly going to see, their capabilities, as well as how we deal with them, what weapon systems we'll use to engage, how we identify them, so on and so forth. We'll then move over to the air assault field, where you guys will be taken through how to mount and dismount airframes for air assault, and then move over, talk about doing mounted operations with our gun trucks, before lastly finishing up over at the UWC, take you guys through mount tactics and techniques. All right, anybody have any questions before we get started?
No for sergeant.
No for sergeant.
All right, follow me. All right, first vehicle we're going to cover here on my right is going to be a BRDM. A BRDM is classed as an armored car, all right? Not like a fucking Brinks truck, but it is considered an armored car, all right? Now, there's a few different variations of BRDMs in terms of weapon systems that they'll actually mount to the top of these things. Generally, you're going to see them mounted with medium machine guns up in the turret. There is a variant that doesn't actually have a turret in it. It's just got a turret ring. Some asshole will stand up in the middle of it with a PK. And then the final version will actually have ATGM launchers sitting up on top of it. Anybody have any idea? Somebody tell me what ATGM stands for.
Air-to-ground missile.
Guided missiles.
Or anti.
Getting there. Anti what?
Tank.
Ground missile.
Tank.
Anti-tank.
Guided missiles.
Oh,
Guided missile. Right? Yes. ATGM, anti-tank guided missile. All right, an ATGM is a wire guided missile. Basically, everybody know what I'm talking about when I say a tow missile? TOW?
Yes, for sergeant.
Yes.
Yes, Sergeant.
Yeah. All right, tow missile is the same thing. It's a wire guided missile. Tow missile is what NATO forces use. Same exact premise. Basically, it uses little electric signals sent through wires to guide the missile. Very, very accurate. Generally used for anti-armor capabilities, hence anti-tank guided missile, but can be used on other objects, people, so on and so forth. So in terms of the BRDM, obviously it's a wheeled vehicle, which makes it fairly maneuverable, has a very good rate of movement. I mean, it can reach pretty high top speed, especially when on hardball, i.e. asphalt. At times, they can be amphibious. It just kind of depends on Arma. A couple of the vehicles we're going to cover here today, at times are amphibious in Arma. Sometimes they're not. It just kind of depends on how Arma wants to work it. So sometimes they can cross bodies water, no problem. Other times they'll sink like a fucking rock. But it is possible that you could see this thing floating across the fucking river at some point. Now, in terms of engagement, all right, we're going to start with the smallest weapon system that we can use to engage it, and then move up from there. All right, so firstly, we got the SAW, all right, the 249. 249 can be used to destroy the tires on this vehicle and get what's known as a mobility kill. All right, basically stops the vehicle from being able to maneuver on us. Doesn't eliminate the threat, but it stops the fucker from at least being able to move around and get an angle on our flank or shit like that. However, it's going to take roughly 100 rounds from the SAW to disable a single tire on this vehicle. So that's an extreme emergency. Hey, we got no other fucking option but to, start hitting the tires with the SAW. Then that's what we'll do. Moving up from there, we got the thumpers, all right, the 320s. Those HEDP grenades that you guys learned about on day one, those can be used to take out the tires, just like the SAW. put 1 or 2 HEDP grenades into one of these vehicles, it'll generally take out 1, maybe even 2 of the tires and disable the vehicle. Moving up from there, we got the AT sticks, right, that the rifle squads carry, the law and the AT4. But the law and the AT4 is going to be effective on this vehicle out to their max effective range of 350 meters. Where the AT4 is pretty much guaranteed a catastrophic kill out to 350 meters. Catastrophic meaning it completely destroys the vehicle. Law is more likely to get a mobility kill. It'll still make the vehicle unusable. They'll have to dismount the vehicle because it'll damage it so much. So it does technically eliminate the threat, but it may not just go up in a gigantic fireball, which in reality, most vehicles don't always go up in a fireball like that. So both of those effect about to 350. Moving up from there, all right, weapons elements, 240. The 240 Lima can load AP rounds. Those are armor-piercing rounds. Those AP rounds can punch right through the armor on this vehicle and kill the occupants inside of it. So they can kill the driver, they can kill the gunner inside of the vehicle using that 240. So if you see a 240 start lighting one of these things up and he's just hitting the sides, not hitting the tires or anything, don't freak out. All right, he's not aiming for fucking tires. He's trying to get the guys inside of the vehicle by going right through the armor. Moving up from there, we got the Maws. All right, Maws is guaranteed catastrophic kill on one of these things out to their max effective range of 1,000 meters. One of the benefits of using the Mark IV Maws is that they can load HE rounds, and this being a light armored vehicle, that HE round is actually powerful enough to get a catastrophic kill on this vehicle at that range. They don't have to use heat, that high explosive anti-tank round. They don't have to use that on light armored vehicles. They can use HE. Lastly, the Javs. Javelin could absolutely destroy this thing with a single missile, but that is a gross waste of ammunition. All right, we're not going to send 1 of 2 Javelin missiles that we're carrying in a missile team at a vehicle like this. We have too many other weapon systems that we can effectively engage it with to waste a Javelin on it. Now, in terms of identifying one of these and calling it out, fairly simple, a pretty unique looking vehicle. Just call it as a BRDM. Very simple, nothing more to it. All right, anybody have any questions on the BRDM?
No, First Sergeant.
No, First Sergeant.
No, First Sergeant.
All right. So the next vehicle we're going to cover on my left, it's a BTR. Now, in reality, there's a few different variations of the BTR. In Arma specifically, there's 4 different variations. We're going to cover all 3 of them as a single variation, those being the BTR 60, 70, and 80. Because at the end of the day, they're all handled the exact same way for us. Doesn't matter if it's a 60, 70, or 80, going to be handled the same way. Now, BTR is going to be classed as an APC, armored personnel carrier, so it can carry troops inside of it, roughly a squad-size element of troops in the back. That's roughly 10 guys can fit in the back. They can also have guys right up on top of it, but it'd be fairly rare that you'll see that. Again, it's a wheeled vehicle, so fairly maneuverable, pretty high rate of speed. All right. Again, at times it will be amphibious, sometimes not. In terms of armament, they're generally going to be outfitted with a heavy to medium machine gun. Some variants will have a heavy and a medium machine gun in the turret, so they'll have both. In terms of engagement, all the same weapon systems that we'll use against the BTR or against the BRDM that we just talked about, we'll use all those same weapon systems for all the same reasons against the BTR. Now, the biggest difference in terms of threat level, why we would consider our class the BTR at a higher threat level than the BRDM, 1, it can carry troops, so there could potentially be 10 more personnel in the back of that vehicle. 2, they're generally going to be outfitted with a heavy and potentially a heavy and medium machine gun, as to where the BRDM is generally only going to be outfitted with a medium machine gun, unless we're looking at that variant with the ATGM. So there's a little bit of common sense you got to put into play there. All right, we're always going to engage the biggest threat first, but if we got a BTR out there, say a BTR 70 that's got a heavy machine gun in it, but we got a BRDM with an ATGM sitting up on top of it, which one do you guys think we're going to hit first?
BRDM.
Why?
Because he has anti-vehicle capabilities.
Pretty much. All right. We're going to hit the BRDM first. He's got those ATGMs. They're much more accurate than any fucking machine gun, and they're much more deadly. They got a hell of a blast radius on them. Now, in terms of identifying the BTR, all right, firstly, what's the big visual difference you guys notice between the BTR and the BRDM we just talked about?
More tires, First Sergeant.
Right? Number of tires. Right? There's 8 on a BTR, there's 4 on a BRDM. Technically, there is 8 on a BRDM. There's 2 little fucking wheels on each side up underneath its belly, but at the end of the day, BTR's got 8 big ass wheels on it. BRDM's got 4. So it's pretty easy to differentiate visually between the two. Now, why the hell would it be important to differentiate between the two if we can use all the same weapon systems? Because of that threat level, because of those weapon systems, all right? If we're dealing with a BRDM that's just got a medium machine gun on it, and we got a BTR with a heavy machine gun, both are engaging at the same time, we're going to try and hit that heavy first. Make sense to everybody?
Yes,
Yes,
for
sir.
sure.
Yes, sir, Sergeant.
Yes, sir, for sure.
Yes, sir.
All right.
So, in terms of identifying one, calling one out, just call it as a BTR. All right. Doesn't matter if it's a 60, 70, or 80. It makes no difference. Just call it as a BTR. You're good to go. All right. Let's move on to the next vehicle. All right, here we have another BTR. Now, as I said, in Arma, there's basically 4 variations of the BTR. BTR 60, 70, and 80. This is the 4th one. That's the Btr80 Alpha. Btr80 Alpha has essentially all the same characteristics and capabilities as the other 3 BTRs. But what's the big visual difference you guys notice?
It's
Oh,
a
okay.
little
Yeah,
kind
large
of
gun.
gun.
Sergeant. Scary for Sergeant.
Right, a big fucking autocannon sitting up on top of it. Well, big is relative. But at the end of the day, autocannon sitting up on top of there, much, much more dangerous to us than any heavy machine gun. All right. Those things chuck HE rounds out there at a pretty fucking high rate of fire. Obviously, those rounds are going to be dangerous to us as infantry, but they're also dangerous to our air assets. To our fast movers, not so much. This thing generally isn't going to be able to bring down an A10. It's going to be moving too quickly. But especially for our rotary assets, whether it be a Black Hawk or a Chinook, if this thing can catch one of those out, catch them low and slow, it can take down a helicopter pretty damn easily. So this is a much, much bigger threat than the other 3 types of BTRs. Now, in terms of engagement, we still use all the same weapon systems to engage this as what we would the other BTRs. But again, we got to talk about that or think about that threat level. All right. So autocannon's much higher threat level. We got to take care of an 80 Alpha before we take care of, say, a 70. All right. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes, for
Yes,
Sergeant.
for Sergeant. Yes, for Sergeant.
All right. Now, in terms of identifying one, obviously it's very visually different in 80 Alpha compared to the other 3 BTRs. Just simply call it out as a BTR 80 Alpha, or if you want to simplify it even more, just say it's an autocannon BTR. Everybody's going to know what you're talking about. All right, let's move on to the next vehicle. All right, next vehicle we're going to cover here on my right is a BMP-1. A BMP-1 is classed as an IFV. It's an infantry fighting vehicle. It is what we would consider medium armor. It is capable of carrying troops. Again, roughly a squad-size element of troops. Roughly 6 to 10 guys can fit in the back of one of these. At times, it can be amphibious. At times, it's not. BMP-1 is going to be outfitted with a large smoothbore cannon, as well as the rocket up top. Now, that cannon is predominantly used for anti-armor capabilities, but they can load HE rounds. It's a big fucking HE round flying through the air. Now, it does have a fairly slow rate of fire, but again, it is a big round flying through the air, so it is still quite fucking dangerous to us as infantry. Now, what's the big difference you guys notice between BMP and, say, the BTRs we just looked at?
It's tracked for
Tracks.
Sergeant.
Tracked vehicle, right? So what's a couple of things we know inherently about tracked vehicles? We know they're highly maneuverable, right? You make very tight turns in a tracked
You can
vehicle.
go off road.
Go off-road very well.
No,
Right.
no tires to shoot.
No tires to shoot out. All right.
He can rotate his axis.
Yep. And make very tight turns. Generally not going to have a very high rate of speed, right? Tracked vehicles are generally going to be slower than wheeled vehicles. All right. So let's bounce back to one of those that was said. No wheels, right? So what does that mean for us if this thing doesn't have wheels?
No saws and no 240 Bravos?
Well, you're not wrong. The 240 doesn't really play into the wheels. All right, so let's think back to the BTRs and the BRDMs, right? We use the saw to take out tires. Okay, well, we can't do this on that. Do that on this. It doesn't have any fucking tires. We use the thumpers, all right, the 320s to take out tires. It doesn't have any fucking tires. We use the 240 to punch through the armor of light armored vehicles. Well, this isn't lightly armored. It's medium armor. 240 round isn't going to punch through the armor on this. So there's now 3 weapon systems that we've lost in terms of being able to engage this vehicle. Automatically makes it a bigger threat, don't you think?
Yes, for Sergeant.
Yes, for Sergeant. Yes, for
Yeah.
Sergeant.
Less shit we can kill it with makes it more dangerous. Okay, so what's that leave us? Well, firstly, AT sticks, AT4s and laws. AT4 and law are going to be, again, effective on this thing out to 350, provided you hit it in correct position. As you guys can see on this thing, it's got very heavily sloped frontal armor. Okay, you shoot this thing in the face with a fucking M72 law at 250 meters, it's going to laugh at you and then shoot you back. All right. Same goes pretty much for an AT4. You may get lucky inside of 250 and be able to hit it in the face and do enough damage to dismount it, but not likely. So you want to hit it in one of the soft spots, all right, down in the belly armor by the tracks. Disable the track if you can, or destroy some of the components inside. Hit it right in the ass, right in the back doors. In all their brilliance, they decided to mount their fuel tanks to their back doors. Hit it right in the back doors, or hit it in the top deck. All right, top deck's the top of the fucking vehicle. If you can hit it right behind the turret, great. If you can hit it right in front of the turret, even better. The engine is in the front of this vehicle. If you can get an elevated shot from above and hit this thing in the top plate right in front of the turret, take out the engine, you're good to go. Now, in terms of identifying one of these vehicles and calling it out, actually, it's fairly unique looking. Like most of these vehicles, you got that large smoothbore cannon. Not all of them will have that rocket sitting on the turret, so don't rely solely on that. Just look at the main weapon system. If it's that large smoothbore, you know that's going to be a BMP-1. In terms of calling out, just call it as a BMP-1. You're good to go. All right. Anybody got any questions on that?
No, for
No,
Sergeant.
for
No, for Sergeant.
No, for Sergeant.
All right. Next vehicle to the left here. It's a BMP-2. BMP-2, what's the big difference you guys notice between that and the BMP-1?
He has a bigger cannon and he has an ATGM.
All right, so we got the missile up top. That is an ATGM, to be specific. That's a Conqueror's missile. Doesn't have a bigger gun. It's a much smaller gun. The gun on the BMP-1 is an 86 mil or something right around there. That's a 30 mil, basically, that's sitting on the 2. But it is an autocannon. All right. Now, in reality, they will generally fire either HE or AP, or actually have both loaded into a belt and fire a mix of both. In Arma, they only fire HE rounds out of autocannons. So we've already talked about how dangerous autocannons are, why they're dangerous, so on and so forth, both to us as infantry and to our air assets. And on top of that, it's got an ATGM sitting up on top of it. All right. So in terms of engagement, we're going to use all the same weapon systems to engage a BMP-2 as we would a BMP-1, but we're automatically going to class it at a higher threat level because of that autocannon and the ATGM sitting up on top of it. In terms of identifying one, again, don't rely on that missile tube up on top. Not all of them are going to have a Conkers on it. Look at the main gun. If it's a pencil-thin barrel, you know that's a BMP-2. If it's large smoothbore, you know that's a BMP-1. The only real exception to this is the BMP-3, which is basically the bastard child of these two vehicles. You just take a 1 and 2, put it together, you get 3. BMP-3 has the main weapon system from both vehicles. It has a large cannon on it as well as a small autocannon. So those are very easy to recognize. It's got 2 barrels coming out of the turret. You're always going to know that's a BMP-3. In terms of the 2, call it as a BMP-2. You're good to go. Any questions?
No, for Sergeant.
No, for Sergeant.
For Sergeant, Private Def has got a question.
Go ahead.
Do any of these vehicles have night vision or any kind of low-level light?
It's going to depend on the variant. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It'll depend on how late a model it is. So we'll say the BTRs, for example. BTR 60s and 70s, generally no, will never have any type of low light or night vision or even thermal optics, as where some of the late model BTR80 and 80 alphas will. Same goes with the BMPs, especially the BMP-3s. Those actually have thermal optics as well as the capability to fire ATGMs out of their main gun.
Thank you, First Sergeant.
All right. Anybody else got any questions? All right. Let's move on. All right. Somebody tell me what this vehicle is.
Main battle.
An
Heavy armor
MVP
for
Sergeant.
for Sergeant.
It's I forgot the
T80?
Russians letter for. Yeah, there you go. T70. I think it's just T70. First sergeant.
For the most part, you're all correct. To be specific, this one's a T-72, you know, because of the light that's next to the barrel there. At the end of the day, it doesn't fucking matter. It's an MBT, or main battle tank, or simplify it even more, it's just a fucking tank. Now, the reason that it doesn't matter is just like with the BTRs, where it doesn't matter if it's a 60, 70, or 80, pretty much the same gig on MBTs, right? We handle all of them the same, in the sense that we don't. We find a fucking hole and hide in it as best we can, unless we have no other option. Heavy armor like this is shit for weapons elements. All right, so guys with the Jav was made to kill Soviet tanks like this. That's what it was designed to do. Now, some of the late model stuff, some of the real, late model T90s and stuff like that have the reactive armor, they can survive a hit from a Javelin missile. It's made to counteract the Javelin missile. So some of the real late model stuff, we can't take it out with a single jab. But the vast majority of MBTs that we'll see of this kind of school, we can kill with a single jab. Moz, not so much. Guys don't really understand that oftentimes. A Moz isn't designed to kill a main battle tank. It's not really its role in the military. It is capable of it at times, but you're not going to shoot an MBT in the face at 800 meters with a Moz rocket and expect the thing to fucking go catastrophic. Not what it's there for. Same thing goes with an AT4, all right? Yes, it's an anti-tank weapon system, but it's an anti-tank weapon system basically from the fucking 80s, right? It's not made to take on a brand new main battle tank from 2008. It's not, okay? Obviously, common sense should tell you when it comes to armor, don't shoot it in the face. It's where armor is the thickest, all right? None of our small arms are going to be effective against MBTs. Our AT sticks aren't going to be necessarily effective. We may be able to get a mobility kill with an AT4. A law is just going to giggle at you. AT4 mobility kill, we may be able to take out a track, or again, if we can hit it in the top deck. Most MBTs, if you hit it right behind the turret, that's where the engine compartment is. Generally, you'll see two big, large grates back there. That's exactly where the engine is. Fire into those grates from above. You can sometimes kill the engine on it. They said Moz, kind of the same gig. Got to hit it in the soft spot. Tracks are in the rear or in top deck. Jav, generally, it'll kill anything with a single hit. Now, as I said, in terms of identifying one, calling it out, so on, I don't care if it's a T-72 Bravo, a T-80 uniform, a T-90, it doesn't matter. Just call it as an MBT or simply tank. It's good enough. All right, any questions on any of that?
Yes,
No,
Private
for certain.
Sergeant. Private Shindy got one.
Send it.
Does its turret operate when the engine is off?
Yes.
Thank you, First Sergeant.
Private Royer has a question for Sergeant.
Go ahead.
Can we touch upon crew sizes so we know in terms of number of dismounts that we have to track?
It's going to vary depending upon the model. Generally, it's 2 or 3. For the most part, it's going to be 3 because you're talking driver, gunner, and TC, tank commander. 99% of tanks in Arma don't have a loader. So you're only looking at 3 personnel tops.
Thank you, First Sergeant.
All right. Anybody else got anything?
No, for Sergeant.
All right. Let's move on. All right, next vehicle right behind me here. Anybody have any idea what this is?
I believe NATO nicknamed Tunguska.
DU-23?
Shirka?
Shilka, but you're close. All right. Yes, to be specific,
Zeus
it's
gun?
ZSU 23-4 Shilka. It's our nickname for it, also known as a Zeus Cannon, all right, or simply a Zeus. The reason it's called Zeus because it sounds like fucking thunder when it goes off. Now, I stressed to you guys how dangerous BMPs are and Btr80 Alphas because of those autocannons. What do you guys see sticking out of the front of this?
Four
Autocannons.
autocannons.
4 fucking autocannons, all right? This, in reality, they can only fire it in quick bursts, 20 rounds or so at a time. In Arma, it doesn't matter. You can just hold down the fucking trigger and let her eat. This thing will rip through 250 rounds of HE in roughly 10 seconds. It can spit some ammunition out there. Now, this is predominantly an anti-aircraft gun. That's what it was designed for, but obviously it can depress the barrels down and fire at infantry perfectly fine. Now, it does have active radar tracking. That's what that big snare drum looking thing up on the roof is. That's its radar system. So, again, obviously a threat to our air assets, both rotary and fixed wing, but also a threat to us as infantry. Now, in terms of engagement, think of this thing basically like a BMP. It's another tracked medium armored vehicle. We're going to use all the same weapon systems against this as we would a BMP. However, if we got one of these and say a BMP-2 in the AO at the same time, we're going to hit this first because it's not necessarily too much more of a threat to us as infantry. It is somewhat because of that higher rate of fire, having 3 more barrels, but it's a much, much bigger threat to our air assets. So we want to eliminate this thing as soon as we find out about it. In terms of identifying one and calling one out, obviously it's a very unique looking vehicle, has a very tall profile. Even if it's concealed behind, cami nets or foliage or whatever, just look at the rooftop. All right. If you can see the roof and see that little white snare drum, you know that's a Shilka. That's a target priority. Get word sent up immediately and eliminate it as quickly as possible. All right. Any questions on the Shilka?
No, for sergeant.
Sergeant.
All right. Next one. Anybody have any idea what this one is?
Tunguska?
That is correct. This is the Tunguska. Now, the Tunguska, they were basically like the pissed off brother to the Shilka. It's got all the same capabilities, essentially. It's still got 4 autocannons on it. I know it looks like there's only 2 because the barrels are kind of fucky up there, but it does have 4 autocannons on it. It's also got those fucking Mickey Mouse ears sticking out the side of it. Anybody have a guess as to what those might be?
Anti-air missiles?
Anti-air missiles. All right. Now, in reality, it's going to be different. In Arma, those things have about a 5-kilometer range, which in Arma, 5 clicks is a pretty good fucking distance. These are a big, big threat to our air assets. Autocannons, yeah, they're dangerous to us as infantry. They're also dangerous to our air assets. But those anti-aircraft missiles, big threat to our fucking air assets. This thing trumps just about anything else in terms of targeted priority. We see one of these out there, we got to get it identified, positioned, and engage it as quickly as we possibly can. Now, in terms of identifying it, all right, again, unique looking vehicle, fairly simple. You got those big fucking missile pods sticking off the side of the turret up there. Also up on the rooftop, all right, radar up there, kind of your more traditional looking concave, constantly spinning radar system. Very easy to differentiate between this and a Shilka. All right. Anybody got any questions on the Tunguska?
Yes, First Sergeant, Private Shindy.
Send it.
Is it classified as a medium armor or a heavy armor?
Nope. Medium armor, just like with the Shilka.
Thank you, First Sergeant.
Private Malaki has a question.
Send it.
In terms of threat level, is this higher than the Shilka, but still lower than an MBT?
Nope. This is higher than an MBT. MBT is dangerous to us, but we can still put Defilator, good old fucking Mother Earth, in between us and eliminate the threat of that tank. This thing being a threat to our air assets, we can't call in air on an anti-aircraft vehicle. We have to take care of it as infantry. As we're a tank, we can sit back behind a fucking mountain somewhere and just call in air and kill it.
Thank you, First Sergeant.
All right. Anybody else got any questions?
No, for sergeant. Negative, for sergeant.
No, for Sergeant.
All right. Let's move on. All right. We're going to cover these 2 vehicles together. One's on either side of me. Anybody happen to know what these are?
Gun trucks.
Gaz?
Yeah, guys, I was gonna say.
Older style. Older
The
style.
one on the right has a 40mm grenade launcher, and the one on the left has a heavy machine gun.
None of you are wrong. All right. At the end of the day, we label them as gun trucks. All right. So, be specific, these are UAZs. One's got a Dishcom, which is 12.7 mil heavy machine gun, basically a 50 cal. The other one's got an AGS-30. It's not a 40 mil, it's a 30 mil, but it's very similar to our Mark 19 40 millimeter automatic grenade launcher. So, what's important about these when it comes to whether it be the UAZs or the GAZs. There are GAZ gun trucks. They're a little bit bigger. They're more armored. They're what we would consider a light armored vehicle. These are what we consider soft skin vehicles, meaning they have no armor or simply a soft vehicle. You hear somebody say, hey, it's a soft vehicle. It just means it doesn't have any armor. The GAZ variants, those will have armor on them. So what's important about a gun truck, all right? Anybody ever heard the term technical or techie before?
Yes, for sure.
Yes, for Sergeant.
Sergeant.
Okay, what do you got? Somebody tell me what you think of when you hear the term technical.
Toyota with a
Yeah.
machine gun on the back for Sergeant.
Yeah.
It's almost a pickup with probably a light machine gun on it, but the gun truck is probably way dangerous and way threat, as we can see just carrying a 50 on it or a grenade launcher.
Exactly. All right. A techie is a fucking taco truck with a PK mounted in the back of it. Taco truck is a Toyota, not a fucking food truck. So that's a technical. All right. It's not purpose built to have a weapon in it. It's some guy welded a fucking steel pipe into the bed of the truck. Gun trucks are purpose built with ring mounts for heavy weapon systems. Now, in Arma, there are vehicles that by traditional standards would be considered a technical, the, you know, quote unquote off roads that have a M250 cal in the back of them. Those do exist in Arma. I personally have never seen someone be able to get a hold of a US 50 caliber fucking Browning heavy machine gun and mount it in the back of a truck and not rip the bed off the damn thing. But these gun trucks have, like I said, purpose-built ring mounts for heavy weapons. And the reason we do differentiate between the two is because of that threat. Okay, where we say techie, which we do see at times, we say techie, we're thinking of a soft vehicle with a fucking PK in it, as it's potentially a GAZ with a fucking 30 mil automatic grenade launcher in it. There's a big goddamn difference in threat level between those two vehicles. Now, in terms of these ones, the UAZs, these being a soft vehicle, we can engage these with all the weapon systems we have. All right, small arms can take these out. There's no armor to it. You can easily, you know, drop the driver and the gunner with an M4. So take that for example. Say somebody drops the driver, drops the gunner out of the vehicle with their rifle. All right, good. Is that threat now eliminated?
No, First Sergeant.
Why not?
It'll operate. Any just guy on Earth can hop on the gunner's seat and start shooting back.
Right. That weapon system can be remanned. Okay. So while it may be temporarily fucking dealt with, it's not eliminated. That vehicle, that weapon system, more importantly, is still a threat to us. So this is especially where the law comes into play. All right. The M72. Soft vehicles like this, it's bread and butter of the law. We got a gun truck out there. Take the driver and gunner out of it if we can. Dump a fucking law into it, boom, that threat is permanently eliminated. We never have to worry about that weapon system being remanned. All right, so keep that in mind. Same goes for the GAZs. Like I said, those are a little bit more up armored. We're not necessarily going to be able to shoot the driver out of the fucking thing with an M4, but we can still dump a law into it and destroy that fucking vehicle. Now, in terms of identifying one of these, you know, simply call it as a gun truck. If you can, try to identify what weapon system is on it. All right, because there's still a pretty big difference between a 50 cal heavy machine gun and a fully automatic grenade launcher chucking HE rounds out there. So call it as a gun truck, but do your best to identify what weapon system is up on top of it. All right, any questions on the gun trucks?
Yes,
No,
First
First Sergeant.
Sergeant. Private Chindi.
Go ahead.
Is it worth of any one of these gun trucks to just waste an 84 on it?
Generally, no. We have enough laws throughout the rifle platoon. We can use a law. If we have no other option, we could potentially use an AT4. More likely than that, though, we'll call up blacksmith or combat engineers and just have them place demo on it.
Roger that. Thank you, First Sergeant.
All right, let's move on. All right, next two vehicles. These are what we would consider a troop transport. Be specific, we have a GAZ and a Ural. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day. Just call them as a troop transport, all right? It's just a fucking flatbed pickup, our truck with some benches in the back and a canvas top. They're only used to transport troops. Now, these, again, soft targets, they have no armor. We can use small arms to engage these. One thing I want to point out, though, generally, troops riding in the back of these will be dismounted before they're within engagement range for us, unless they're fucking retarded. or if we're in an ambush scenario. If we're setting up an ambush on a convoy or something like that, they generally should not have any idea we're there until we start engaging. If we're in that situation, all right, if you know there are troops in the back of a vehicle, we're in an ambush setting, don't waste a bunch of fucking magazines from your M4 trying to blindly fire into the back of one of these goddamn things, hoping you'll get lucky. All right, let the machine gunners do that shit. Guys with the saws and the 240s, these things are like fucking pinatas to them. Let them have their fun, burn up their ammo. You got an M4, just wait for guys to try and dive out of the back and run away. Get your nice, slow, smooth, precise shots. Drop them as they get out of the truck. But don't just start blindly dumping mags into the back of the truck. Complete fucking waste of ammo. Let the machine guns have their fun. Now, in terms of identifying one, again, you see a flatbed truck with a canvas top on it, just call it as troop transport. You're good to go. All right, any questions?
No for sergeant.
No for sergeant.
For sergeant.
For sergeant.
Sergeant.
All right, let's move on. All right, so now we're going to get into some of the Op4 airframes. The first one we're going to talk about here is the Mi HIP. This is somewhat the primary aerial troop transport that you'll see. We can fit roughly 2 squad-size elements of troops into the back of one of these things. They can obviously land and drop them off. They can also fast rope out of the back of it, or they can paradrop out of the back of it. Now, this thing is armed, has what we consider cheat guns, one up front, one in the rear. However, these are not offensive weapons. These are defensive weapons. They're only used to defend the aircraft. They're not going to fly this thing in circles around us and try and do strafing runs and shit like that with the machine gun. It's not effective, all right? It's only there to defend the aircraft while they're dropping off troops or so on and so forth. Now, in terms of engaging one of these things, generally we won't. Overall, as an airframe, it's not that big of a threat to us. If we're out there with the gun trucks, we may have the guys with the 50s open up on it. But if we're just out there on foot, we're generally not going to engage one of these things. It's easier for us to just let them drop the troops off and deal with the troops than waste a fuck ton of ammunition trying to bring one of these things down. If it's sitting on the ground and hasn't spooled up yet, we might dump a Maus round or an AT4 into it just to destroy the vehicle, deny them the capability to potentially lift it, or we may drop mortars on it if it's far enough away. But majority of the time, we're just not going to bother wasting the ammunition to engage one of these. In terms of identifying and calling one out, pretty simple. Just call it out as a HIP. You're good to go. Everybody's going to know what you're talking about. All right. Anybody got any questions on the HIP?
No for sergeant.
No, for sergeant.
Sergeant.
All right, let's move on. All right. Anybody happen to know what this is?
Armed hip.
It's a gunship.
Right?
Exactly. All right. Yes, it is technically a HIP. It's one of the variations of a HIP, but it is a gunship. So somebody tell me what a gunship is.
It's a helicopter with a lot of guns on it, First Sergeant.
Exactly. All right. At the end of the day, a gunship is enemy rotary asset with offensive weapons on it. Right? We don't generally refer to our own gunship as a gunship just to eliminate any potential confusion for guys. Yes, technically an Apache is a gunship, but when we identify one of these, when we call them out, we just call it as a gunship. That immediately lets guys know that's a rotary asset with offensive weapons. Find some fucking cover. All right. This thing's primary role is not troop transport. It can still carry 2 squad-size elements of troops in it, but those troops are not going to be as effective as rocket pods and cannon pods and bombs and whatever other crazy shit they'll strap to the bottom of one of these things. So we see one of these, just call it as a gunship, find some cover. These especially, we won't engage unless we absolutely have to. We'll generally rely on our air assets to take one of these out. If for whatever reason they can't, we can call on one of the JAV teams. If we have the Javelins out in the field with us, a JAV can lock on and take down a helicopter, but that's an absolute last resort. Hey, we got no other choice. If we have the gun trucks with us, we can open up with the 50s. The 50s will punch right through these things, no problem. Downside of that is you got to keep in mind this thing has a lot of fucking guns and rockets on it, and you hop up into the turret with a 50, they have tracer rounds that they can follow back to you, and you're now sitting in a 15-foot tall fucking bullseye. So Just keep that in mind if you do need to start engaging one of these things with a 50. If it turns and starts moving towards you, you better get to fucking cover. Any questions on the gunship variation of the hip?
Go for Sergeant.
Go for Sergeant.
All right, let's move on. All right, somebody tell me what this aircraft is.
Hind.
Hind, Mi-24.
Correct. All right, Mi-24 Hind. What would we call this?
And a tank
Gunship.
helicopter.
Attack heli.
Right? Rotary asset with a bunch of fucking guns on it. It's a gunship. Don't bother with all the confusion. That simple. A gunship. Doesn't matter if it's the hip we just looked at, if it's a Hind, a Havoc, doesn't matter. It's a gunship. We handle all of them the same way. Now, Hind, obviously, they have a bunch of different fucking weapon systems that they can strap to it. One thing that a lot of people don't realize with the Hind, it can actually carry troops. You can fit about a squad-size element of troops inside of a Hind. That's why the fuselage of the aircraft is so large. There's benches in there for guys to sit on. Big doors kind of clamshell open on the side of it, and they can drop off troops. They can even parachute out of the fucking thing. But end of the day, we're going to handle a Hind or a Havoc the exact same way we're going to handle the hip that we just talked about. Find some fucking cover, wait for air assets to take it out. All right, any questions?
No, for Sergeant.
Go for Sergeant.
Go for Sergeant.
All right, let's move on. All right, somebody tell me what we got here.
Apache Helicopter.
AH-64.
Warlord.
Look at you trying to be an overachiever. Be specific, this is the AH-64 Apache Longbow. To be more specific, this is the Guardian variant. Anybody have any idea what the fuck a longbow is? Besides the weapon?
It's the radar system.
That's right. Right, that big fucking cookie looking thing up on top of the rotors? That's the longbow system. That's the radar system for the Apache. That wasn't always a thing. Okay, when the Apache was first introduced, they weren't all longbows. The longbow system wasn't created yet. Now they all are. Now, the Apache for us, the Guardian variant can be outfitted with a bunch of different types of weapon systems. Of course, there's the Hellfire Missiles, very well known for the Apache, one of the greatest armor-killing fucking weapon systems out there. They can do LOAL, which is lock on after launch, which means we can have one of our JTACs on the ground lasing a target. These guys can be sitting back 5 clicks away, launch a missile in the general direction. It'll grab that laser and follow it into the target. Apaches are really well known for their pop-up attack capability, meaning they'll sit back behind a mountain somewhere. Nobody has any idea they're there. They'll wait for somebody to laser a target for them. They'll pop up, fire a missile, and then drop back behind the mountain. Nobody the wiser that they were ever there. Now, they also have the 30 mil chain gun up underneath the chin there. That chain gun can engage accurately at 2.5 kilometers, connected directly to the gunner's helmet. Where he looks, the gun looks. 2.5 clicks out, they can start putting rounds on target. That camera system up on the nose, that kind of wart-looking thing, that camera system, they can spot and identify targets from 5 clicks away. Now, the rocket pods, they got to get in a little closer to be able to use those. And then lastly, they got the Sidewinder missiles, A9s, that they can fit to the outside of the winglets to be able to take on enemy air assets. Now, the Apache used to be used in what was known as a hunter-killer team with Kiowas. Kiowas have since been retired by the Army. They now go up in what's known as an AWT, Air Weapons Team. 2 Apaches go up at a time. We sometimes simulate that. We will sometimes send up 2 Apaches at a time, and they'll work together, do buddy lasers and stuff like that. Vast majority of the time when these guys are doing their job, you're never going to see them until possibly the end of the night. But majority of the time, they're going to be setting 5+ clicks out there, providing reconnaissance for us, spotting and identifying targets, and sending a missile into the AO every once in a while. So there'll be a time where you're sitting there looking at a piece of armor potentially, and it just randomly blows up. Generally, that was the Apache sitting out there. They just chucked a Hellfire in at it. Now, call sign for the Apache for us is Warlord. So anytime you hear us talking about Warlord, we're talking about the Apache. All right? Anybody got any questions?
No for certain.
Go for Sergeant.
Go for Sergeant.
All right, let's move on.
Lancer.
All right, next one we got here. The AH-6 Little Bird, to be specific, this is the MELB, or Mission Enhanced Little Bird. Now, our Little Bird is a little tuned up from what kind of the basic Little Bird is within Arma. MELB variant, we have that kind of fishbowl looking thing underneath the chin there. That's the camera. That camera is essentially the same camera that's sitting over on the front of the Apache. So they can see shit from a long ways out with that camera. We can also outfit Hellfire racks for armor capabilities. We can outfit M134, that's a 7.62 minigun, or the GAU-19 Bravo, which is the 50 cal Gatling gun, as well as rocket pods, all kinds of other fun shit. Now, Little Bird is, for us, primarily used in a reconnaissance role. It kind of fills that role of a Kiowa. These guys will oftentimes work together with the Apache, providing reconnaissance, so on and so forth. But it is armed. We can use it for CAS, close air support. Fairly rare that we will do that. Obviously, this aircraft is not armored, doesn't even have fucking doors on it. So when they do come in, they'll generally come in very low, as quickly as they possibly can, down below the treetops if possible. They'll pop up at the last second, hit them with guns and rockets, and then peel off and get the fuck out of there. Call sign for the Little Bird for us is the Lancer. So anytime we talk about Lancer, we're talking about the Little Bird. Right? Anybody got any questions?
No for certain.
No, for sure.
All right, let's move on.
Thunder.
All right, somebody tell me what this is.
A10
A10.
Thunderbolt 2.
A10 Thunderbolt 2. Why is it called the Thunderbolt 2?
I think it's the big sister for the P-47 Thunderbolt, the one that used for the World War II.
Cameras.
It is indeed named after the P-47 Thunderbolt, what was considered the original tank killer, right? P-47 was also known as the Milk Jug, or simply the Jug. To tell you the truth, World War II aircraft didn't kill fuck all for tanks, but they still called it the tank killer. This was named after it. Now, the A-10, also known as the Warthog, or simply the Hog, was the first aircraft designed for the singular role of close air support, which is why this thing is as unique as it is in its design. Right, between the titanium bathtub that everybody hears about, the pilot sits down in, the twin turbofan engines. This is a subsonic aircraft, meaning it cannot break the sound barrier, has a very slow speed, very big, flat, fat wings that give it high maneuverability at low speeds and give it great lift and loiter time because of the subsonic, big wings, big lift, so on, means it can stay in the AO for a long time. Can also be outfitted with a fuck ton of weapons because it has such good lift, between laser guided munitions, dumb drop munitions, Maverick missiles, cluster munitions, AIM-9 sidewinders, pretty much anything you can think of, we can strap to one of these things. And lastly, there is, of course, the Galway Avenger, which is the 30 mil Gatling gun up front. Yes, it's a big gun. No, it's not so fucking big. If physics allowed it, it would overpower the engines and make it fly backwards. It's fucking retarded. It's big, but it's not that big. All right. Now, the A10 for us is our primary CAS platform. So the majority of the time, if we're calling in air support, the A10 is going to be the one doing the work. Call sign for the A10 is Thunder. So anytime you hear us talking about Thunder, not talking about the weather, talking about the A10. All right. Anybody got any questions on the A10?
No for certain.
No for certain.
No, for Sergeant.
No, for certain.
All right. What we're going to do now, I'm going to be handing you guys over to Sergeant Shaw. He's going to take you guys over to the air assault area, talk you through how to mount, dismount our rotary assets for air assault. All right. Sergeant Shaw, let's get him moving.
Right to that first, Sergeant. All right, follow me, guys. All right. Does anyone know what the name of the aircraft is behind me?
Blackhawk.
Blackhawk?
64 Blackhawk.
Yep, UH6.
You say UH-64?
Yes, Sergeant.
Pretty close. It's the UH-60. UH-60 Blackhawk. For this, we have a call sign for it. I'm going to tell you guys that this call sign is super easy to remember if you remember what the other call sign is for the other airframe we're about to go over is. This one is called Phoenix. So if you hear the word Phoenix, that means this. Don't forget it. Now, the Sikorsky UH-60 Blackhawk, a 4-engine, twin-blade, tandem lift, or medium lift helicopter. It's usually meant for it's like our primary source of insert. Usually take 4 of these things, fly in, land, get everyone out, get the fuck out. Really simple with that kind of meaning right there. Now, when boarding this thing, we board at a 90-degree angle. You guys see how we have 2 lines on each side here?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Now, this is strictly because of Arma. If we had everyone line up on one side would get full. However, the aircraft would actually not be full. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, sir.
For some reason, you can't board seats on the opposite side, so you have to kind of split it up. So that means when this thing lands, you got to make sure you pick a side that has the least amount of people, and you'll always get a spot. Now, board at a 90-degree angle, you don't want to go from the back end to the front end. You want to avoid the tail rotor or anything in the rear. You don't get swung out on by a rotor or anything like that. You don't get fucking insigib like that. Now, the reason why you want to do this is that, well, yeah, you don't want to get shot up from the tail rotors and shit like that. Now, when you guys go up to board, you guys are going to line up like this, and you see this guy right here? He's going to be the most ranking NCO or SNCO, CO, whatever, on the ground, right? He's going to go there. He's going to ask the pilot permission to board. Once he asks the pilot permission to board and permission has been granted, he's going to tell you guys to board. Wait until that call is given in a non-combat situation. The reasoning for this is that the pilot still might be adjusting things on the airframe, therefore cannot have anyone on board while doing so. Any questions on that?
No, Sergeant.
No, Sergeant.
No, Sergeant.
All right. Now looking at this guy's stack right here, you guys see, let's just say the guy in the back right there, that's going to be a team leader. All right. So everyone in front of him is not a team leader. The point of this is that the team leader is responsible for everybody below him to get off the bird and on the bird first. So he's the last one on, last one off, with the exception of the squad leader. Squad leader will be the last one off, last one on. But before him, it'll be the FTLs. You guys tracking on that?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Another reason for this is that the FTLs will also be manning the guns. So because they're basically the second and last ones off, they're also going to be maintaining the guns for as long as possible. Now, moving on from there, when you guys are boarding this in a non-combat environment, your job, once you're told to board this thing, is to get on with a quickness. Do not wait, get told to get on. If this thing lands and you know it's your aircraft that you need to board, you get on it. If the gun is unoccupied, you grab the gun. There's no order or anything like that. The goal is to get on this airframe as fast as humanly possible and get the fuck out as fast as humanly possible. You guys tracking?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes,
Yes,
Sergeant.
Sergeant.
That's
Yes,
within the hostile environment.
Correct. If you're in a
Right.
non-combat environment, it's usually on base. Usually we line up like this for just organization to make sure everyone's good to go. But when in a combat environment, this thing lands in a hostile AO, get on, get out. That's essentially the idea there.
Yep.
Now, one last thing to remember before we move on to the next example here. You see these guns here? They spool up really, really fast and shoot really, really fast. With that in mind, these things do not have a safety versus our M4s and etc. So when on base or in a non-combat environment, you want to point these things down at the ground. If you point them anywhere else, that would provide more of a casualty chance. So if you point them at the ground, you won't blow someone's brains out. Make sense?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Gotcha. Because like I said, these things spool up really, really fast. So your accidental misclick or whatever you want to fucking call it could discharge several tens of rounds, basically 30 rounds in a blink of an eye. So be very careful about that. Any questions before we move on here?
No, First Sergeant.
No, Sergeant.
No, Sergeant.
Not a first
No,
sergeant,
Sergeant.
but I do not want that position. I don't want to get yelled at by the other one. All right, let's move on. All right, so dismounting. So as you can see, when you get out on the side you got on from. Very easy to understand like that. When you get out, what you want to do is you want to get out prone and get a sector of cover or sector of view here to cover the airframe. Granted, this is a little kind of smushed up a little bit based on the example. So what you want to do is you want to push this out a little bit further, maybe a couple meters further out away from the airframe to give extra room for people getting out of the airframe. Everybody gets out, gets on the ground, gets prone, gets security from a direction. If you get out and find that an open spot, you take it. If somebody gets out right on top of you and gets the same sector of defense, do not get back up and try to find another place. If you accidentally get down on somebody else's sector, do not get back up and find another place. Just stay down, get that sector of security, because if you get up, you're gonna wave other people, and on top of that, you're not providing security if you're trying to remove. Your goal is to get down and get security as soon as possible. Make sense?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
One of the things to remember with both these airframes is that even though they look big and scary, they are fragile as fuck. So the goal, like I said earlier, is to get in and get out as soon as humanly possible. So the longer these things are stationary, the more of a target they are. All right. You guys have any questions on the dismounting procedure here?
No, Sergeant.
No, Sergeant.
No, Sergeant.
All right. One last thing to remember. It's common courtesy, especially it's also kind of semi-enforced. When you get on the airframe, let your next step in line for the COC know that you're on the airframe. If you get out of the airframe, let your next step in COC know that you're out of the airframe. Example, Alpha, this is Shaw, I'm out of the airframe. Actual, this is Alpha, Alpha's out of the airframe. Get the idea? All the way up the chain.
Sergeant.
Understood, Sergeant.
Moving on, follow me. All right, you guys have any idea what this thing is?
CH-52 Chinook.
Close with the numbers. CH-47.
47, okay.
Yep. Everyone else who said Chinook, you guys are good too. CH-47 Chinook. The reason why I said that earlier with the call signs that super easy to remember is that this thing is called Phoenix Heavy. So if you hear Phoenix Heavy, that's what this is. Super easy to remember both of them if you remember one of them. Make sense?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
All right. Now this thing can fit 26 people. Usually fits about 2 squads plus a couple handies. A couple like free loaders, whatever the fuck you want to call them. So same thing with the miniguns. Team leaders are going to get on the miniguns. They're going to basically stack up last behind all their troops here, get on the guns. Now, the team leaders that get on the gun will be discussed between the squad leaders. Usually, for instance, let's just say this is 1-1, this is 1-2 right here. Let's just say 1-2 is communicating to 1-1 that their TLs are going to take the miniguns. So therefore, 1-1's TLs will just get on board. Make sense?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
All right. Same thing
Sergeant?
with this. Yep, send it.
When you said 1-1, you mean the first platoon, first squad?
Yep.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Same thing with the miniguns. Point them down when you're on a non-combat environment. You don't want to ND and discharge 30 rounds. Makes sense like that. Now, boarding procedures like this, the reason why we have two guys like that, two different lines like this, is that not because of armor, but because it's more of an organizational purposes. You don't want two squads to intermix with each other because it makes you lose track of where everybody else is. Make sense?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Same procedure though, you want to make sure that the ranking NCO or whoever's in charge here will ask permission to board before you board. Now, you guys have any questions about this?
No, Sergeant.
Negative, Sergeant.
One last thing to remember before we move on is that there's 2 bench seats, meaning these guys right here on the far end of the ramp here. These allow you to shoot out through the back. Now, typically you want to save these seats for the guys that have the bigger guns. If you're joining up with a weapon squad, let the 240s take those seats. If you're joining up with another rifle squad, whoever has an M249 will take the seat. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Sergeant.
All right, moving on. All right. Now, dismounting, it's kind of the same concept as the Blackhawk over there. You guys get out, circle, grab a sector defense, same concept. Don't get up once you pick a spot. If you overlap with somebody, don't worry about it. Make sure you just cover that spot. Now, the only exception to this is that you guys see the guys on my left and right two guys with the packs and the 249s?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
Sergeant.
This is where those bench sheets come into play. They're the first ones out of the airframe, so they need a button hook and look forward. We have no security on the front side of the bird besides the miniguns, and those guys aren't going to be on there for too long, right? So they need to get out, button hook around, and look forward. So if you're the first one off the airframe, regardless if you have a 249 or not, make sure you do that. Make sure that it's covered. Typically, it will be the 249, like I said, because they're on the end bench sheets here, but they're not. Take it up. Any questions on that?
No.
No, Sergeant.
No, Sergeant.
Now,
Is this?
send it.
Is this? Are these technically too close?
Yeah, a little space that out a little bit, and not to mention, you don't have to worry about like this right here. You can kind of curve it around. You don't have to like leave a gap like
Alright.
that. All right. Now, here's the tricky part. So we had an armor limitation on the Black Hawk with boarding because one side will get full, the other side will not. Now we have an armor limitation with dismounting on the Chinook. Anyone like to take a guess here?
If you get out a certain way, it'll be on the sides instead of the rear, Sergeant.
Nope, not quite.
No.
Anyone else?
Maybe stack over the ramp and maybe someone's head gonna hit by the rudder.
Yep, pretty close on that one. So, like I said earlier, we have 26 slots on this back of the bird here. If all 26 people decide to get out at the same exact time, we're gonna have a human pyramid of basically gore and blood because they're gonna get flung into the rotor. There's only a certain amount of spots getting out on the actual Chinook. Let's just say there's like 3 spots that it'll put you out on. If all 3 spots currently occupied by another person, they're going to get stacked up on by another person, so they're going to be standing on top of each other's heads. Basically making a human pyramid, like I just said. It's an armor limitation, but you get the idea here, right?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Now, the way we get out of this airframe. So if you take these bench seats right here with the 249s, they get out first, they button hook. Now, beyond that, if you're closer, the closest people to those bench seats will then get out. So you have to look down towards the ramp, and whoever's on, basically, if you're sitting on this side right here, I'm looking left. If there's no one left on my left-hand side, I'm going to get out. But if there's people in front of me, I'm going to wait for them to get out. So you exit from the back of the bird to the front of the bird. Make sense?
Yes,
Yes,
Sergeant.
Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
So it involves a little bit looking and making sure that there's no one else in front of you, and then you get out yourself. It helps alleviate that problem. Just to double check, because it is kind of a weird kind of thing to explain. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Yes, Sergeant. I got a
Okay.
question.
Send it.
What if somebody is off comms during the landing zone?
Okay, I get you. I get what you mean. It's happened a couple times. If somebody's having technical problems or off comms or whatever reason, but they're not here during the landing part, if they let the people above them know that they're not here, that's what they need to do first off, to let people above them know that they're not here. That way the actual airframe can take off and just keep them in the airframe, and they can get inserted again later. But when you need to get off and there's a person in front of you that is unresponsive, just give them a couple seconds and then get off yourself, all right? So just give him a couple seconds to make sure that he is in fact not here, and then dismount the bird.
Understood. Thank you, Sergeant.
Anyone else have any questions?
Private Malaki.
No, Sergeant.
Send it.
Does the dismount issue happen with getting off of the Black Hawk as well, or is it exclusively with the Chinook?
It's exclusively with Chinook for right now. I have yet to actually see it happen with the Blackhawk. Granted, there's only about like 6 people that can get off on one side, so it doesn't really necessarily happen too weirdly. I've never seen a jumbo flock of people getting out of the Blackhawk, so don't worry about it on that one. If it happens, then we'll change how we teach it, but until then, just don't worry about it for the Phoenix. But for this one right here, always worry about it.
Thank you, Sergeant.
No problem. Anyone else?
No, Sergeant.
No, Sergeant.
All right. Moving on. Follow me, guys. All right. Now, here is the fun part. This is everybody's favorite thing, convoy. I say it like that because some people have varying opinions. I, for one, actually love having convoys. I like driving these fucking things. It makes you feel powerful, etc., etc. Now, starting up with this thing, these things are called MRAPs, with the exception of the two vehicles on my right. Does anyone know what MRAP stands for?
Mine resistant.
Ambush protected.
Yep, mine resistant, ambush protected. I've heard answers like armor protected, etc., but the mine resistant part. The reason why it's mine resistant, ambush protected is that these vehicles are designed with the sole purpose of surviving, like it is, like what you just said, ambush. The vehicle itself will be disabled 100% of the time during an ambush. However, it'll keep the crew alive. If a mine goes off underneath it, the whole of the bottom part of the vehicle here is shaped like a boat, like a bottom of a boat. It'll deflect the shrapnel away from the cargo, preventing people inside from actually getting hurt. They'll be shell shocked a little bit, but they will not actually be basically shredded by shrapnel. You guys tracking on that?
Yes,
Yes, Sergeant.
So these things are very good in terms of keeping people alive. Now, moving down the list of available MRAPs we have at our disposal. So the only difference between each of these MRAPs are basically the configuration of the turret itself. So we have just a standard M2 on top with a guy on the crow's nest right there. Next up, we have the Mark 19. It's just imagine the Mark 19 exactly where the M2 is, Mark 19 being the grenade machine gun. Moving on from there, we have the M2 Crows. Now, the M2 Crows is essentially a remote-controlled turret on top. Some guy inside is playing Xbox using thermals, advanced sighting apertures, etc. to shoot targets. You guys tracking on that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Sergeant.
All right, next up is we have an unarmed variant. This is primarily used from getting from point A to point B, as you would imagine. We usually dismount and leave these guys behind, the unarmed variants. Now, next up are the two things that aren't MRAPs, but are basically pretty good here. Well, I guess the GCV is kind of an MRAP here. Now, this one right here is the RG31. What's up?
Cute.
It is. It's kind of small and cute. Now, it's a RG31 GCV. GCV standing for Ground Command Vehicle. The reason why it's a ground command vehicle is that typically the commander of the task force will usually be residing in that vehicle, or the convoy commander, one or the other, usually the same person. Now, that silo on the back isn't necessarily just a silo. It actually holds a camera that allows it's a camera on a stick that goes up into the air, extending about 10 feet higher in elevation to look over defilade. It has a advanced sighting aperture, meaning you can zoom in further, basically look at things. It essentially just getting intelligence. You guys tracking on that?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
That's a very useful camera. If you ever see a perspective of it, I'd actually recommend you go look for it, because you get to see what the overhead camera looks like. It does give you quite an elevation. Now, next up is this one. This one is a Mortar Striker. This is currently used by Havoc 4. As you guys can see in the back right there, with those flaps are open, it's housing a mortar right there. In front of it, it's also holding a Mark 19 that can be controlled from the inside as well. So, pretty powerful vehicle. It can house up to 3 people, one controlling the mortar, one driving, and one RCing the Mark 19. You guys tracking on that?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
All right. Now, in terms of setting up an MRAP, let's just look at this one because you guys can see the two guys on the left and right. The MRAP usually is given to one apiece to each squad, right? The armament on top will be determined by HQ elements, so don't worry about that necessarily. But the idea is that one MRAP will be given to one squad apiece. Now, within that squad, the 2 fire teams, one of the fire teams will be utilizing that MRAP. All right. Now, within that fire team, it'll be basically 2 guys inside with 2 guys on the outside during a dismount kind of walk through the town kind of thing. 2 guys on the outside will provide security while 2 guys are actually still manning the vehicle. Now, the default positions that we basically express to everybody inside the 506, however, this is subject to change. Granted, the one rule I'll tell you guys in a second is The rifleman will typically be the driver, the grenadier will be the gunner, the team leader, and automatic rifleman will provide security outside the vehicle. You guys tracking on that?
Yes,
Yes,
Sergeant.
Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Now, that rule I just mentioned, that rule is whoever is better for that job will do that job. If the driver is having extreme technical difficulties and can only see a certain amount of frames while driving, or he just is dog shit at driving, don't make him drive. Someone else will drive. These are not set in stone rules. You guys tracking on that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
You don't want this fucking thing crashing, because if he crashes and you somehow lose a tire, you kind of just lose your ride home. All right? These things are very valuable. They're a huge force multiplier, but you don't want these things to end up in a creek because someone can't drive.
Mhm.
Same thing with the gunner. If the gunner can't aim, get someone else better for the job. You have a question?
Yeah, Sergeant. This is Private Duffy. There we go.
Yep.
Do you guys use soft mount and hard dismounts in this unit? Meaning that soft dismount where
Yeah.
most of the team.
We have a couple different dismounting procedures, similar to what you already have in mind. I'll get to them further down the line here.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. Now, going into the more technical aspect here, when you're in a gunner seat or a driver's seat, it is your responsibility to set up the long-range radio inside the vehicle to the net of 50. This is the convoy net. Long-range radios are like the ones on my back. They are also built into each one of these MRAPs. You access them similar to your short-range radio controlled PAPA. You use Alt PAPA instead, all right? It'll open up a different looking terminal. However, if you highlight the buttons, you'll realize that all the buttons still have the same text bubble as the short range radio does. So you can figure it out there. Delete the frequency there, put 50, select the frequency, there you go. You now have a long range radio active. Now, with that long range radio to talk on it, what you need to do is you need to hit Control Tab. All right, that'll bring up the primary for that long range radio. All right, once you're on that net and you all have it set up and everything, and you're in the convoy, what you're going to do is you're going to do a radio check on 50. If you're the first Vic or the second Vic, let's just say the second Vic for example purposes. This is Vic 2 radio check, or any station this net, this is Vic 2 radio check on frequency 50, over. Anyone who's already previously established on the net will then reach out to you, do the rest of the radio check. You guys tracking on that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Sergeant.
All right. Now, once you get that set up as a driver or a gunner, dependent on who's better at talking on the radio, typically the gunner will be setting it up because the driver has to focus on driving. Can't really maneuver his hand that well to basically talk on the radio and also drive at the same time. So typically the gunner will do it. However, only one of you needs to actively be talking on it. If you guys are both have it set up, that's totally fine. However, if both of you start jamble-fuck talking at the same fucking time, that's a problem. So just dictate one person to talk on the radio. You tracking on that?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
All right. Moving on from there. In terms of the gunner, now, contrary to the airframes with pointing down at the ground, if you point down at the ground with these things, you're basically pointing at people's heads. So what you need to do while you're on base or in a non-combat environment is you need to point up in the air. A ND will not affect anyone on base. However, it'll affect people in villages outside or outside the wire. Not necessarily an immediate problem, but it'll make it so we don't actually lose any casualties on base. You guys tracking on that?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
All right. Now, the 50 net I just talked to you guys about, that is the convoy net, is very important. You realize this. When you are dismounted and the convoy net is no more, don't worry about it. When you're in a convoy, meaning you're moving from point A to point B, that is the primary net for all vehicles to be listening to and basically taking the word of the convoy commander as basically gospel. You need to listen to him at all times. Now, what I mean by that is that if you have some other team leader or squad leader in your vehicle telling you to do something that is contradicting what the convoy commander is telling you to do, don't listen to the guy inside your vehicle unless he literally is the convoy commander. Make sense?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Now, there is a little bit of a gray area here, and the only basically exception to this is that if you have an immediate threat, which threatens the entirety of your vehicle, that you deem as an immediate threat that you cannot circumvent by just driving through, you need to basically take it upon yourself to dismount your vehicle. All right. Basically, pull it over to the side, mount, and do what you need to do to save your guys' crew. Now, the way we dismount is do what we call a herringbone. So if you see a situation like that, call for a herringbone on the net. You're allowed to do that, all right? As any vehicle in the net, call for herringbone if you deem it as a necessary thing to do. Herringbone is what you see behind me and around me. These vehicles are zigzagged off the road, left and right. You guys see what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
First Vic will turn left, second Vic will turn right, and go down the line alternating. If the first Vic turns right, then the second Vic turns left. It's simple as that. Just alternate each vehicle. Now, with that being said, if first Vic turns left, second Vic turns right, and the third Vic turns left, and if you turn right again, that right will be exposed in basically to the enemy. Don't make that turn. Turn to the other direction if it has better concealment or cover. All right. Just make sure that you don't overexpose yourself when you're doing this dismount. You guys tracking on that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Sergeant.
Another exception to that too is that if you see somebody ahead of you going to the wrong direction, stay fucked up and go to the alternating direction. Don't try to go right again if the guy in front of you also went right and you needed to go right yourself. Just stay fucked up. Make sense?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
All right. Moving on from there. Now, when you're traveling in a convoy, you're going to be coming across a lot of turns. With these turns, only the first Vic and the last Vic will say first Vic turning left, last Vic turning left. The reason for that you don't want to have every single Vic on the net basically saying that is that it jam-fucks the net and makes it so the convoy commander can't get his word across if he needs to make a quick correction. You guys tracking on that?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
If the last Vic says the other direction that you're not supposed to be going, the convoy commander will address it and fix the convoy immediately. All right? He'll realize that somewhere along the line, the game of telephone has got fucked up, and he'll fix it. Now, with that being said, continuing on the idea there, is that first Vic will generally say what the action is. If he's entering a town, he'll say first Vic entering town. If he's exiting the town, the first Vic will say exiting town. Same thing with the last Vic. Last Vic will say entering town, exiting town. First Vic making left turn, last Vic making left turn. You guys tracking on him talking about that?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Now, one of the last couple things that you'll probably hear on ConvoyNet, aside from basically route corrections or anything like that, is the phrase push through contact. Now, what this means is that you're pushing through a field or pushing through a road, and there's some basically dumb fucks with AKs shooting your vehicle. All right, they're not really a huge threat. They just have basically small arms engaging the vehicle. Our vehicles are resistant to that kind of shit. We don't need to stop the entire convoy to deal with that shit. So you'll hear on the convoy net from the convoy commander to push through contact. So we'll just do a drive-by basically. We'll shoot what we can, but we're not really there to clear out that particular area. Our objective is somewhere else, so we're pushing through contact. You guys tracking on that?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
All right. Now, before I go on to this next segment with dismounting here, do you guys have any questions about herringbones, first Vic turning left, fit 5-0, anything like that?
No, Sergeant.
No, Sergeant.
Sergeant, I got a question, Private Shindy.
Send it.
Can you repeat one more time? Sorry, for the if the first Vic herringbone to the right and the second Vic just ruined it and herringbone to the same right, what's the third Vic gonna do?
All right. For starters, don't say repeat. Try to change that habit over to say again. We don't use repeat inside the army for numerous reasons, but going off of what your question here. So in that example, you're saying that the first Vic turns right and the second Vic turns right either because there's no cover on the left or he fucked up himself, right? So there's two Vics on the right-hand side. What you're going to do as that third Vic is that if there's still no cover on the left-hand side, but there's cover on the right-hand side, go ahead and turn right. However, if there's cover on the left-hand side and the guy just fucked up, turn left. Even though in a normal circumstance, if that second Vic turned left and you would turn right, you want to turn left. You want to try to evenly distribute the amount of forces on both sides of the road. Does that make sense?
Yes, Sergeant. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
No,
All
Sergeant.
No, Sergeant.
All right, moving on from there. So we have 3 dismounts that we use here in the 506. We have a soft dismount, combat dismount, and full dismount. All right, we don't use the word hard dismount or whatever the fuck. It's soft dismount, combat dismount, and full dismount. You guys tracking?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Now, for a soft dismount, that means everybody besides the driver and gunner will get out, meaning it will look like this. You'll have the 2 remaining members of the fire team out with their guns, providing security around the vehicle's immediate area. So, to touch up on that, when you have a soft dismount, those guys aren't going to be tasked with clearing buildings or whatever they need to do unless they absolutely need to, obviously. But their job is to basically make sure the vehicle does not get blown up by a random RPG with some guy coming out of a building. They're going to stay close to the vehicle at all times, making sure that they're acting as like a sensor for that vehicle to prevent it from going catastrophic. You guys tracking on that?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes,
Yes,
Sergeant.
Sergeant.
The other fire team can be used to maneuver on buildings, etc., but this fire team is basically its main responsibility is protection of that vehicle. Now, moving on from there, we have the combat dismount. Combat dismount is usually used when we have a defensive position or we're setting up an ambush or whatever we're doing here that involves not moving these vehicles. Combat dismount means that everybody besides the gunner will actually dismount the vehicle, meaning the driver will get out. Same kind of concept as the other 2 people that already dismounted from the soft dismount with the driver. However, the driver is going to stay even closer to the vehicle because his responsibility is his battle buddy. If his battle buddy goes down and he's outside the vehicle, it's that much harder to actually determine whether or not he's down. So he has to stay in constant communication with that gunner, looking at him if he needs to. Make sense?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Sergeant.
All right. Moving on from there, we have the full dismount. This will be called if we're basically leaving behind the vehicle. We're not intending to take it further with us, or if the vehicle's on fire and somebody inside it is not realizing that that vehicle is on fire. So the guy will be calling for a full dismount, probably screaming, but the idea is still there. Everybody will get out of the vehicle and abandon the vehicle. You guys tracking on that?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
All right. Now, one last thing to cover about dismounting. When you guys dismount in a herringbone like this, you guys see this road we're standing on right here?
Yes,
The
Sergeant.
huge sight line, right? I can see all the way up the road and down the road, right? Example, if this road were to go out further, you guys can see further down it. Now, this road right here, like I just said, is a huge sight line. It gives us an advantage. However, it gives the enemy an advantage. So we're going to not utilize this as much as humanly possible, right? We don't want to be crossing the road from left and right like a chicken trying to cross the road, all right? If you do that, you're going to be turned into Swiss cheese. You guys tracking?
Yes,
Yes,
Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
So whatever side you dismounted on is the side you're going to stay on. The squad leader will work with other squad leaders to get the job done. He will not at any point try to get you guys across the road unless sufficient cover or concealment is being used. All right?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Now,
Yes,
speaking
Sergeant.
of cover, these vehicles, they can be utilized as cover. However, the only time that these things aren't considered not to be used as cover is that HE is being used, right? If you see RPGs going off, you see 40 mics going off, or whatever the fuck they're using, do not sit next to these vehicles, all right? They need to be maneuverable. If you're next to them, you're going to stifle their movement, let alone if they go up in flames, you're going to go up in flames. You guys tracking on that?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes,
Yes,
Sergeant.
Sergeant.
All right. Speaking of movement with these vehicles, if you're the driver, make sure that when you're backing up, you honk that horn ferociously, all right? You want to make sure that anyone behind you knows that you're backing up, because these things back up pretty quiet, basically the same kind of sound as they're going forward, so people might not notice. They might be sighting in somewhere else. There's a lot of noises going on in the battlefield, so make sure you honk that horn every time you back up. You guys tracking?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant. Sergeant, that's a left click, right?
Yes, I believe so. All right, does anyone have any questions?
Yes, Sergeant. I
Sergeant.
got a
No,
question.
Sergeant.
Pravishan, do you have a question?
Yes, sir.
Bandit? Sir, thanks for promotion.
For the unarmed MRAPs, when we just make a full dismount and we do whatever we want to do, would we just go back and grab it because it's our ride home?
In the event, yeah. Essentially, let's just say you're assaulting an objective and you have a couple squads that are unarmed while the other squads are armed. Those unarmed Vics, you'll dismount them in a safe location and then leave them there, stash them basically, and come back to them if needed. Usually, if we leave them behind, we'll have another detachment come pick it up behind us and bring it back to base. You tracking on that?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yep.
Perfect. Anyone have any questions before I get into another aspect here that isn't related to convoy?
No, sir.
No, Sergeant.
Now, I'm going to cover two things here. I'm going to cover the use of third person, and I'm going to cover you dying in the air in the battlefield. Now, going over dying first, we have two different types of deaths. We have a technical death and an actual death. Now, a technical death means I accidentally disconnected from the game. My connection went out, so I disconnected from the game. I got glitched through the world and fell to oblivion underneath the map. That would be a technical death. I got flung across the map from a rotor from a Chinook. That would be counting as a technical death. You guys get what I'm talking about here?
Yes,
Yep.
Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Anything that doesn't happen in a natural environment of just you getting shot and bleeding out, all right? That will be considered a technical death. Now, the steps to basically get back into the fight from a technical death is to obviously respawn, get back to where you need to at the base, and rearm yourself with all your proper munitions, all right? After that, what you're going to do is you're going to seek out a flagpole on base. It's usually the flagpole between the air arsenal boxes, all right? Now, that flagpole will have teleport markers labeled as individual section leaders, meaning squad leaders, platoon elements, and company elements, all right? You basically select the one you're attached to, whether, let's just say you're attached to 1-1, there will be a thing that says teleport to 1-1. Teleport to 1-1, it'll put you about 10 meters behind the 1-1 squad leader, meaning you'll get back into the fight basically instantaneously. You guys tracking on that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Now, for whatever reason that this thing does not work because Arma likes to be Arma, your next step is to grab an Android device. Android device is underneath the tablet's selection of the arsenal box. Same thing as the micro dagger. The Android device will allow you to send text messages to squad leaders. So grab that, send a text message to your squad leader, informing him about the technical insert. Then he'll send it up the chain of command until you get technically inserted by Ares, which means you'll get teleported back to the fight by an Ares. Make sense?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, sir.
Now,
Sergeant, do I have to pick up
Yep.
that Android device in case I just technically died? Or I just have to get him every time I go with my squad?
Now, if you technically died and the flagpole works, do not bother picking up the Android device. Keep your micro dagger, all right? It's only if the flagpole does not work, you want to grab that Android device, send a text message, get a response back, respond with Roger, and then put the Android device away. Back in the arsenal box and grab the micro dagger. You tracking on that?
Understood, Sergeant. Thank you.
No problem. Next up is the actual death. Now, actual death means you got shot in the battlefield and you're bleeding out, and then you rendered unconscious for a extended period of time, and you basically get that respawn timer on the top of your screen, and your body ragdolls a little bit more. You guys tracking what I'm talking about?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Now, there is some technical deaths that are related to that. Sometimes you'll bleed out faster than you should. However, treat it as an actual death until it's discussed about afterwards, all right? If you ever see a respawn timer at the top of your screen and it's because you got shot and you were bleeding out for that long, treat it as an actual death until after the action, and report it during the after action report that you think it was kind of a bug, all right? Now, what happens with the actual death is that you're going to respawn back at base like you would a technical reinsert or technical death. Grab all your munitions, and what you're going to do next is you're going to look for the reinforcement helicopter that could be on station already on the helipad waiting for basically a person to be there, all right? If you see that, go ahead and approach it, ask permission to board, let them know that you need to be reinserted, and then await being reinserted, all right? Next up is that if the reinforcement helicopter is not on station, what you're going to do is you're going to set your short range radio to the frequency of 5-1, all right? 5-1 is the official reinforcement net, all right? We have aviators on that net monitoring it at all times. Tracking on that?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Now, you set your short range to 5-1, and you basically perform a radio check and then request that you need to be reinserted, all right? The aviators will talk you through it, let you know what's happening, and then be there to meet you. Now, if you don't get any readback on 5-1 from your short range, what you're going to do is you're going to go back to the arsenal, grab a long range like the one on my back. There's a couple other ones you could grab. Or you can go seek out one of the MRAPs that are on base, like these ones, and set that long range over to 5-1, and then try the same thing again, all right? The reason why we have you try the short range is that trying the long range involves you having to do extra steps that might not be necessary if the helicopter's flying close enough to base. You guys tracking on that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
All right. Next up is that if after you tried this several times on the long range, you've done that already, what you're going to do is you're going to grab an Android device and message the aviators directly. You're not going to message your squad leader or anything like that. You're going to message the guys who are flying around the airfield. All right. If they don't get back to you after several messages of them trying to reach out to several different aviators, what you're going to do at that point is you're going to type in side chat. What I mean by side chat is you're literally going to type something like this. If I can type correctly. See what I'm talking about?
Yes, Sergeant.
Now, this method right here is a last resort method. You want to make sure you absolutely try the other methods several times and give a couple minutes each time of reaction to make sure that they are not getting back to you. The reason why I say this is that your event, once you get billeted, it happens once every 2 weeks, right? We want to get you back into the fight as soon as humanly possible. We don't want you sitting at base wasting your Sunday or Saturday. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Sergeant.
If you die officially in a realistic setting, we want to get you back into the fight realistically in a realistic setting. So if that's not happening, we got to get you back in the fight somehow, right? So if you type that out, that means you tried all the other methods, and we're going to everybody's going to see that and make that a priority to get you back in the fight. All right? Now, on the topic of death still, if you die once, you respawn, you do all that stuff, you get back into the fight, right? You get reinserted, you're fighting again. If you die again, that is it. You're done. You need to disconnect from the game and move yourself out of the TeamSpeak and await briefing. If you don't want to wait for the briefing, you can disconnect from TeamSpeak, go about your Sunday or Saturday. We're not going to make you wait not playing the game for debrief, all right? It's up to you to wait for that. You guys tracking on that?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
It's kind of a shitty thing to say that you need to disconnect and get out after waiting 2 weeks to go do this thing. However, we do need to have that limit, or otherwise people are going to be gung-ho and do things that they shouldn't be doing, all right? There needs to be some kind of punishment for doing stupid shit and getting yourself bleeding out and everything like that. If you happen to die twice, typically it might be your fault the second time. Make sense?
Private Roy,
Yes,
has a
Sergeant.
question,
Yes, Sergeant.
Send it.
Is there going to be like a written debrief so we don't have to wait around if we die, or will there be some record so we can get
Yep.
the intel and not wait?
There is a after action report that is sent up by all squad leaders to their respective HQs. All the sections also put in their own reports, and it'll happen across all task force on a singular post. So you'll have all the information from the entire cycle of deployment or FTX at your disposal to basically reflect on and look at if you need to. Additional to that, you can also reach out to your squad leader or teammates to basically get further information if you want.
Thank you, Sergeant.
No problem. Anyone else have any other questions? Shandy?
Sergeant, this is Larry.
Yeah.
I won't be able to finish the training. I have to go.
Okay. In that case, yeah. Take care, man.
Right.
Private Shandy, you have a question?
Yes, Sergeant. My question is, how can I perform a radio check on 5-1? Do I just go and say this is Private Shandy radio checking on 5-1, or do I use my team or my squad call sign?
Username. Just go ing station this net. This is so and so on 5-1 radio check.
Understood. Thank you, Sergeant.
No problem. Private Biglin.
Okay, so if you either get a technical or like say technical death in the beginning, does that exclude from your actual deaths? Your actual deaths?
Technical deaths do not count. If you get armored, that's on Arma. That isn't on you. We don't want you to basically suffer for Arma screwing you over.
All right.
All right. Any other questions?
Private Malaki.
Private Malaki.
Is it just reset your loadout when you get back into the game?
Yeah. Just go to the arsenal. Don't worry about grabbing the ammunition that you already used. Let's say you're a rifleman, you shot an AT4 already. And then you die or technical death or whatever, go ahead and grab your full loadout again. Don't worry about having an AT4. think of it as like you're being reinserted as a reinforcement, right? You're a guy on base getting sent in to reinforce the platoon, right? So you're just gonna have a full kit.
And then for technical death, is it your team leader or your squad leader that you're gonna text about it?
You're gonna send
About
it
a
to your
reinsert.
squad. You're gonna send it to your squad leader. Team leaders still carry a micro dagger, so they're not gonna have the functionality of texting people. If your squad leader doesn't get back to you within a timely manner, bump it up to your platoon leader or platoon sergeant.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
Nope.
All right. Last thing I'm going to go over here with you guys before I hand it back to First Sergeant here is the use of third person. I basically personally play exclusively in third person. First Sergeant plays in third person. Captain Drumheller plays in third person. All right. People are allowed to play in third person. However, you guys got to remember that because you have an elevated slightly above your head and you're kind of behind camera, if you're using third person, you can see things that you typically wouldn't be able to see in first person. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Mhm.
Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
With that in mind, don't try to exploit that by looking down at the ground, trying to look over a wall to see on the immediate side over the wall. All right? It looks very stupid to see people do that, and it's very noticeable, so that you will get basically reported for that. It breaks immersion and basically breaks the fundamentals of what we're trying to do, and it's no good. All right? So don't try to exploit the use of third person to try to get information about things. However, sometimes it happens, right? Sometimes you see things you shouldn't see from third person, and then there's nothing you can do to avoid it. If that happens, just pretend you didn't see it. Act like you didn't see it. Don't call out the target. Just don't say anything about it, all right? Try your best to do it. I know it takes some time to get kind of like used to that idea, but just try to do that. It'll make it work. If it happens, it happens, but just don't make a note about it, all right?
Sergeant Shaw,
Mhm.
this is Private Devi.
Yep.
So a lot of times we see guns poking out of doors, poking out of walls. Can you call them?
That one's a tricky one, right? Try to use your best judgment on that. If, like, example, if there's like little like holes in the wall and they're already kind of poking through the wall, but not necessarily the hole, you can go ahead and call that out. Sometimes you have these little slum shack things that there's a bunch of holes in. However, if you guys see like legs poking out of the hole or anything like that, you can basically you can just try to clear the room, all right? But don't say there's already a person in there.
Thank you.
It's kind of a difficult kind of thing to judge on your own, but just try not to be like, oh my god, his legs are poking through the wall. Don't say that out loud. That breaks immersion a
Okay.
little bit.
Will do.
All right. Anyone have any other questions about that?
No,
Sergeant,
Sergeant.
it just like we don't abuse using the third person. We just play it normally and have fun. That's it.
Essentially. One last thing to remember about this third person though is that with vehicles in particular, don't call out targets for the gunner unless you have a good reason to. Like example, if you're in these vehicles, there's a lot of windows. You can get away with calling out targets for the gunner. However, if you're in a Black Hawk or a Chinook and you're trying to call things out through the window of Chinook for the gunners, you're batshit crazy. Make sense?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Well, that's it for me. First Sergeant, you have anything?
All right, gentlemen. I know you guys had a lot of information that was just fucking thrown at you here. All right. Quick thing that we're going to go over related to the deaths and stuff. All right. As Sergeant Shaw told you guys, if you go KIA twice, that's it. You're done for the night. Disconnect, so on. That's only when we're on deployment. All right. We are currently on deployment with the unit. When we're in an FTX cycle, all right, that's all about training. So that rule goes away when we're in an FTX cycle. So when we get done with this deployment and go to our next training ground, you can die as many times as you want. Obviously, if you're being fucking retarded, you're going to catch hell about it. But it's about getting you guys trained up and up to speed and so on and so forth. So that rule goes away when we're on a training cycle. Everybody understand that?
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, for Sergeant.
All right. Like I said, I know you guys just had a lot of shit thrown at you. All right. Anybody have any questions on anything that Sergeant Shaw has covered with you?
Sergeant, I got a comment.
Who's I?
Private Shindy.
Send it.
May we just, after all of that, before we proceed to the tactical course, may we just have 5 minutes. You can grab water and stuff like that. It's almost 2 hours.
I'm gonna be giving you guys a minute here once we get over there. All right. Anybody else got anything?
No, First Sergeant. Thank you.
No, First Sergeant.
All right. Follow me. All right. So what you guys are going to do, we're going to take a quick couple of minutes so you guys can go grab some liquids, grab you something to munch on, take a piss, fucking rub one out, whatever the hell you need to do. When you get back, you're going to go into the arsenal box here. Each of you are going to grab a loadout. I don't give a shit what the loadout is. Just make sure that your weapon is conditioned for. Once you're back, have your loadout and so on. Just stand over there in front of Sergeant Shaw and stand by for further instructions. All right? Everybody clear on what's going to happen?
Yes, First Sergeant.
Yes, First Sergeant.
First Sergeant.
All right. Time starts now. All right. Got everybody here. Everybody ready to go. All right. Follow me. All right, so what we're going to be going over here is MOUT. All right, MOUT standing for Military Operations on Urban Terrain. Before we actually get into it, though, there's a couple of things I want to go over with you guys. All right. Firstly, understand that what we go over here, this is the absolute bare bones basics, guys. We don't have the fucking time to teach you all the minute details when it comes to moving through a town, clearing a building, things like that. All right. There's guys that spend their entire lives specializing in exactly this. I've spent a good chunk of years learning and doing follow-on training with close quarters and things like that. It's not something you're going to be shit hot at immediately. It takes time. It takes a lot of fucking practice. There are things that will transfer from real life into Arma. They work well in Arma just like they do in real life. There are some things that do not transfer from real life into Arma. Some things in Arma you end up doing the complete opposite way as you would in reality. So any of you guys that may have actual fucking training when it comes to CQC, don't take what we do here as, well, this is the right way to do it because that's how you do it in reality. That's not always going to be the case. Okay, so some of the stuff we do here may be a little bit different from what you've seen or done in the past. It's because just limitations of Arma, so on and so forth. Lastly, don't be afraid to take it upon yourself to do your own follow-on training. Okay. Watch videos on YouTube. They're all over the fucking place. Read fucking FMs if you need to. FMs being field manuals. There's all kinds of places out there to get further training. At the end of the day, the only really wrong way to do something, especially in close quarters, is to do something you're not comfortable with. Doing something you're not comfortable with, hands down the most dangerous thing that you can do. If you train a lot, you learn a lot, learn different ways to handle different situations, you can be better prepared when that situation pops up. You know, there is a school of thought of, you know, if you learn too many different ways to, you know, make entry into a room, that you're going to sit outside that room trying to figure out exactly which entry method you want to use, and that's going to waste time and put you in danger. It's somewhat the case, somewhat not. So, end of the day, don't be afraid to take it upon yourself to further your learning. All right, is everybody clear on that?
Yes, First Sergeant.
All right. So when it comes to MOUT, working in urban terrain, as infantry, vast majority of the time we're going to be on foot when working in urban terrain. Even when we are doing mounted operations, the only guys that are generally going to be in the truck when we're in an urban terrain are the driver and the gunner. Everybody else is going to be on foot. So the first thing we want to talk about is kind of the 3 golden rules that I have when it comes to urban combat. First one, what do you guys think the biggest thing we fight is in an urban environment? What's the number one thing that we would fight in an urban environment?
Other infantry for certain.
All right, other infantry?
Irregular troops.
Obstacles.
What do you mean by obstacles?
Like buildings, to get around, and blockades, obstacles, stuff like that.
I guess first sergeant, it's gonna be the ambushes that can be easily made from a window or a doorway on us.
All right, threat sectors, yeah. So, buildings. There's a lot of them in an urban environment, right? Everybody agree on that?
Yes, for certain.
Yes, for sergeant.
Okay. So, take the buildings away. We just have an open field. We can shoot the enemy pretty easily across an open field, right?
For sergeant.
Yes, for certain.
Yes, for sergeant.
Okay.
For sergeant.
Now put buildings in between us and the enemy. Can we still shoot them easily?
No, for
For
sergeant.
sergeant.
All right. We have to achieve a sight line on the enemy before we can engage. Okay. So, we're in an urban environment. Number one thing we're fighting is sight lines. We have to get sight on the enemy before we can actually engage them. Even with things like indirect fire, like our mortars, granted, it's pretty much never we're going to drop mortars in the center of a town, especially a town we're in, but we still have to see the enemy to know where he's at. So sight lines are generally the number one thing that we're fighting, aside from obviously the guys with fucking rifles and machine guns in their hands. But again, we have to achieve a sight line on them to be able to engage them in the first place. So if that means sight line is our biggest enemy, what do you think Op4's biggest enemy is?
Sightlines.
Sight lines, right? So that's our biggest advantage, is that we can break sight lines by using those buildings. So when we fall into our kind of go-to job as infantry, find, fix, flank, eliminate, that flank part is a hell of a lot easier when we can break those sight lines. He has no idea where we're moving to. So it's also the number one advantage that we have. So rule number one when it comes to urban combat, pay attention to your sight lines, okay? You start getting engaged by the enemy, break the fucking sight line. Do not stop and try to return fire. Okay? You get shot at, what's your first reaction?
Take cover
Get
for
the cover.
To cover.
Get to cover. Okay? It's not to fucking sit out in an open street and get your ass shot off. You move to cover. You break sight lines. Then you can start falling into the rest of the fix, flank, eliminate. Rule number 2, wherever your head goes, your weapon goes. Okay, and this has to do with those threat sectors. Okay, all the windows, doors, balconies, rooftops, alleyways, so on. All those different areas that a threat can present itself, you need to be ready to engage as soon as you see that threat. Now, we have the ability, obviously, in Arma to, do the free look, hit alt, and kind of look around and so on. Great. But at the same time, if, your weapon is pointed forward and you're looking off to the right and you see some dude pop up in a window, now you got to get your head spun back around straight forward. Now get your body spun around to the right. In that amount of time, he's probably going to shoot first. Who usually wins a gunfight?
Shoots
Guy
first.
who shoots first.
That's right. Okay. Guy that shoots first wins the gunfight. You want to be the guy that wins the gunfight. So wherever your head goes, your weapon goes. Last rule. Move ready to fight. Okay. Everybody understand what I mean when I say combat pace? So your weapon up in your shoulder.
Yes, for certain.
Yes, for sergeant.
Okay. So when we're in a high threat environment, we move at a combat pace. What is a high threat environment? It's an environment where contact is likely expected. So if we're in an urban environment, no friendlies have cleared through that area yet, it's a high threat environment. If we're in an urban area and friendlies have already cleared through there, it's a low threat environment. We don't have to move at a combat pace. We can have our weapon down. It's not that big of a deal. but we're moving through a high threat environment. You need to have your weapon up ready to engage as soon as you need to. Okay, we have the added luxury in Arma. You don't have to worry about carrying, or holding an 8.5 pound fucking carbine up all day. Your arms don't get fatigued in Arma. You don't have to worry about holding a 20-pound machine gun up there. Your arms aren't going to get fatigued. Obviously, we can't do that in reality. So move ready to fight. Everybody understand that?
Yes, First Sergeant.
Yes, First Sergeant.
All right, so when we move through an urban environment, right, we're generally going to be moving in files. Now, this is one of the kind of separations from reality to Arma and limitations and so on. We'll generally have one fire team on each side of the street. In reality, you would have a squad on each side of the street. You would send an entire rifle company in to clear a town. We can only send a platoon in because we can't put our entire company on the server. So we have to kind of scale that back a little bit. We don't have the manpower to clear a town like you properly would in reality. When we're moving down the street, we have a fire team file on each side of the street. Now, the guys you see over here off my right shoulder are demonstrating to you how they would be covering as they're moving down the street. So you've got the point man covering 12 o'clock. Number 2's right off of his shoulder, 3's off of his shoulder, 4's off of his shoulder. Now, remember, we talked about this a little bit on day 1 with the formations. That last guy, he doesn't turn around and cover the rear unless that formation stops. They stop, yeah, he'll drop to his knee, turn around and cover the direct rear. But he's not going to try and run through a fucking town backwards. All right? It's not going to work out for you. He covers a sector just like everybody else. Now, what's the other thing you guys kind of notice about how these guys are set up? If they're moving down the street just like they are, what's something big that you notice about them?
The AR's in the back.
All right, AR's in the back. What else? What's something big? Notice.
They're up against a wall. They have cover.
All right, they're up against a wall. Okay.
They're bunched
Now,
tight.
in reality, you wouldn't be right up against a wall like that. If you ever heard the phrase "bullets follow walls," bullets ricochet off walls and shit like that. In reality, you stay a meter off a wall, which is about 3 feet. In Arma, that's not a big concern. Just stuff yourself against the wall, you're good. But they're bunched up. Anybody think that's a problem?
Yes, First Sergeant.
Yes, for Sergeant.
Okay, why is it a problem?
RPG for Sergeant.
Okay.
Or grenade.
Or automatic fire, for that matter.
Yeah.
Right. And enfilading fire, right? You guys remember that from day 1 when we were talking about vertical formations, enfilading fire being a risk of those?
Yes, First Sergeant.
Okay. So those are all downsides of them being bunched up, right? And you guys, if anybody watches, any streams or videos or shit like that, right? Every armchair fucking general wants to open their cock holster about, hey, spread everybody out, right? One grenade could kill everybody, right? Everybody's seen shit like that before.
Yes, First Sergeant.
Okay. So let's look at it from the other side of the coin. These guys are moving through an urban environment. They're running the normal 3 to 5 meter spacing in between each guy. So it means there's roughly 10 to 15 feet in between number 1 and number 2. Number 1 crosses a doorway on his 3 o'clock, which he's not looking at because he's supposed to be covering direct 12 o'clock. There's a guy inside that doorway and shoots him in the side of the head. Think number 2 can do anything about that from 15 feet back?
No, First Sergeant.
No, for Sergeant.
Nope. All they can do is watch his buddy get shot. Guys, remember back to day 1 when we were talking about formations? What's the number 1 thing that dictates spacing in a formation?
Environment, First Sergeant.
Environment, terrain. Okay. Terrain more so than anything else dictates your spacing. The only thing that's ever going to trump that is if you have a direct threat of HE. Okay, being, mortars, RPG, stuff like that. You got mortars dropping in your area, obviously you're not going to fucking move in close to each other. But that's a known threat. We always combat the known threat first. If there hasn't been any RPG fired at us, that's an unknown threat. We can't combat an unknown threat directly. We have to combat the more serious threat in that situation, which are the threat sectors. Again, doors, windows, balconies, rooftops, alleyways, so on. How do we do that? We close the spacing in. Okay. So again, those armchair generals that think they're God's gift to fucking tactics and the greatest thing to come along since Patton. Okay. Go take yourself into an actual fucking hot town and let me know how it works when your buddy's 15 feet behind you. Spacing is dictated by your terrain. Everybody clear on that?
Yes, First Sergeant.
Yes, First Sergeant.
Yes, First Sergeant.
All right. So, as these guys are moving through a town, Like I said, each team is in a file on either side. In terms of who's where in the formation, just like we talked about on day one, all right? Whoever's best for that job. If your fucking Grenadier is just shit hot in terms of a point man in an urban environment, put the fucking Grenadier up front. Because at the end of the day, especially in an urban environment, point man is God. Whatever he says goes. If he tells you to look right and, you know, doctrine-wise you should be looking left, you better fucking look right. That point man is telling you to do it for a reason. Whatever he says, do it. I don't care if he tells you to tickle his left ass cheek. You better start tickling. There's a reason for his madness. All right. So whoever's best on point, put him on point. It's not that big of a deal. Now, traditionally, your rifleman is going to be your point man. Team leader's number 2, Grenadier's number 3, and AR is number 4. But again, it's traditionally. All right. It's not scripture. You don't have to follow it 100%. Put whoever is best for it up front. Now, as they're moving in that file, like I said, we got one team on one side, one team on the other side. You think these guys are going to be looking directly across the street at their buddies with their rifles?
No, for Sergeant.
No, right? You don't want to flag your buddies. Flagging is, or sweeping is taking your muzzle across your buddy. So they're not going to have their rifles pointed at the side of their fucking buddy's head across the street, and same thing goes vice versa. So where do you think they're actually going to be looking?
Above them.
Rooftops, second floors.
Up or below.
Exactly, right? They're covering the highs, okay? So they're covering those balconies, those second-story windows, rooftops, shit like that. They're covering high. Team across the street is doing the same thing for them. Point men are covering 12 o'clock, all right? Now, we already know, we just talked about it, right? They're moving in that formation. We know enfilading fire is a threat, right? So that means you're moving down that street and you start getting engaged. What's our first reaction when we get engaged?
Cover.
Find cover,
cover.
Sergeant.
Move to cover. All right. Now, you can at times be quick enough to return fire while you are moving to cover. That takes a little bit of fucking experience and time to be able to that quickly recognize where you're being shot from and try and put some rounds on them to put their head down. But number one, move to cover. Okay. We prefer cover over what?
Concealment.
Concealment.
Concealment. Okay. What's there an overabundance of in an urban environment?
Cover.
Cover.
Cover. Okay. So that means if we're moving down a street and we start getting engaged, we're going to break what?
Sight lines.
Sight lines. Move to cover. Okay. What's another way we could break sight lines though? If we didn't have cover available?
Concealment.
Concealment, throw smoke, right? But again, urban environment, we got cover all over the fucking place. Don't be one of those guys who's, you know, real skittish. You start getting engaged and you just immediately deploy smoke because there's a good chance there's another element that's potentially covering you as you're moving down the street, whatever. Potentially some of Sergeant Shaw's guys are set up on a rooftop somewhere with 240s covering down that lane and you just threw smoke and blinded them. Now they're fucking useless there. And they could have potentially dropped the guy that started engaging you. So always favor moving to cover before you do smoke. That being said, if we need to cross that LDA, if, for example, there's a roadblock down the street or something along those lines, maybe we got a vehicle down the street, a BTR set up, and he's got a beautiful kill lane set up down that LDA. We need to flank it, but we can't flank it from the side of the street we're on because it's just an open field. We have to get across the street over into the other buildings to flank them. In that case, we'll break the sight lines with concealment. We'll smoke out the street. We'll stay back behind the building until that road is completely concealed. We'll cross the street, go up and flank him, shoot him in the ass. He'll have no idea that we ever moved. That make sense to you guys?
Yes, sir, Sergeant.
Yes, for certain.
Okay. So, when it comes to actually clearing buildings, okay, firstly, our SOP is that we do not make entry into any buildings unless there is known enemy combatants or suspected enemy combatants. What that means is, as I told you guys, we can't clear a town like you would in reality. We can't send an entire company in to clear a town. We only have a platoon. We go into a 20 square block fucking town, that's a lot of goddamn buildings. We don't have the time or the manpower to clear every one of those buildings. So we have to kind of scale it back, and we'll only go into buildings where there's a known enemy combatant. So we've physically seen someone shooting from within that building, or there's a suspected enemy combatant. Now, what's some ways you guys think we could suspect that there's an enemy combatant inside of a building?
Fires upon friendlies.
Broken windows.
Okay. broken windows. If he fires upon friendlies, maybe not necessarily directly at us, but we see or hear him shoot at somebody else. All right, what else?
Open doors.
Open doors, okay.
Rifle barrel out of the window.
All right, yeah, somebody's barrel sticking out of a window. That's more so of a known.
Transport Vix nearby, First Sergeant.
All right, troop transports in the area.
The building's at a location that has great eyes on a certain sector.
All right. Building with
Yeah.
good lanes set up.
If it's a compound, that had people in the, I guess, courtyard area.
There we go. We had enemy combatants in the area, right? Maybe not necessarily in that exact building. Maybe they were just outside that building, or maybe there was somebody in that building and we dropped one guy through a window. Might have a fucking buddy in that building. You might have 10 buddies in that building. Either way, we got to go in and make sure. Okay, so all those examples that you guys just gave are a way of, you know, having a suspected enemy threat in that building or in that area. When that's the case, we have to go in and clear those buildings, clear that area out, make sure nobody's going to try and crawl up our ass. All right, does that make sense to everybody?
Yes,
Yes,
First
First
Sergeant.
Sergeant.
Okay. Now, as I said, that's SOP, standard operating procedure, that we don't go into every building. Now, there will be times where order comes down the pipe, hey, we got to clear every building. You know, we're searching for a weapons cache or we're searching for an HVT or something like that. We have to clear every building. All right. It sucks. Nobody fucking likes it, but sometimes we have to do it. So if that's the case, we're clearing every building. Obviously, we go very systematically, just door to door, clearing each building. Now, say we're doing that. We're clearing each building. We've been ordered to clear every building. But 4 doors down the street, we hear gunshots. What do you think we're going to do?
Move towards them.
Move
Clear
towards
the
them?
buildings between that and the gunshots, so there's no one behind you.
Okay. So clear the buildings and move towards the gunshot. What do we combat first?
Sightlines.
No,
Cover.
known threat. Okay, we have to combat the known threat first, right? Known threats are the biggest threats. Everybody tracking on that?
Yes, First Sergeant.
Yes, First Sergeant.
Okay,
Yes,
so
sir.
in that scenario, what's the known threat?
The guy shooting
Guy
at us,
shooting.
First Sergeant.
Guy shooting out the window. Doesn't necessarily have to be shooting at you. He could be shooting at somebody else, right? You could be shooting at a sister squad over on the next fucking block, but he's still a known threat. We have to combat that known threat first, right? Now, if in the process of fucking moving down there, we get two doors down the street and somebody starts engaging from that building towards us, yeah, we're going to push in and clear that out first. That's the more immediate threat. But otherwise, we're going to skip those other buildings. Those are unknown threats. We can't deal with that right now. We need to deal with the known threat. Does that make sense?
That's First
Yes,
Sergeant.
Yes, First Sergeant.
Yes,
Alright.
First Sergeant.
So when it comes time to actually make entry into a building, all right, and you're going to hear entry and breaching a lot of times used kind of interchangeably somewhat. They're not really. Breaching is a forceful entry, meaning you're using some type of force to make entry into that building, whether it be breach charges, shotgun, bars, boot, whatever it may be. 99% of the time, we're not making forceful entry into a building in Arma. We're not breaching, technically. We're just making entry. So when it comes time to actually make entry, first thing that's going to happen is point man is going to approach that entry point and he's going to cut the pie, all right? He's going to pie the opening or pie the threshold. Anybody have any idea what the fuck I'm talking about when I say pie the threshold?
Yes, First Sergeant.
First Sergeant.
All right,
Yes,
so
sir.
somebody tell me what it is to pie.
You're slowly clearing the angle at which that door can be seen from the inside.
Probably you're peeking and making like something quarter circle around the other 12 o'clock of the point man.
All right, pretty much. All right, so if I'm the point man, if we're going to make entry into this entry point right here, everybody see my little red laser there?
Yes,
Yes,
First
Yes,
Sergeant.
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 All right, so if I'm going to come up here and pie, lean out just like this, get a look into the room. Now, what I want you guys to look at real quick is notice that my left foot is in line with the threshold of this opening of this door, if you will. Okay, it's what we call a threshold. All right. What are some other examples of thresholds? What do you guys think? What else would you think would be a threshold? If a door
Corner,
is a threshold, corner,
Window
all
for
right.
Sergeant.
Windows, corners of buildings. What else?
Staircase.
Anything that you
Staircase?
can get through.
At the end of the day, in an urban environment, anytime you leave cover to go into the open, you're crossing a threshold, right? It's a threshold from cover to open. Okay. Pie your fucking thresholds, not just your doors, pie your windows, corners of buildings, so on. If you're coming up to an intersection in a town and you gotta say make a right down the street, don't just fucking blindly turn right and go around the corner. Pie the fucking corner first to make sure there isn't a machine gun sitting down there just waiting for you to come around the corner and it's going to shoot you in the dick. Pie your threshold first. Everybody tracking on that?
Yes,
Yes,
for
first
Sergeant.
Yes, for Sergeant.
Yes, for
All
Sergeant.
right. So, as you guys seen, I stopped the left side of my body in line with that threshold. I didn't cross into this open area here. All right. If this is a door into a building, I'm not going to step into here. All right. Anybody have any idea what this area is called?
Kill zone,
Kill
Sergeant.
zone.
All right. You're not wrong. There's a nickname for doors. Fatal funnel. It's called a fatal funnel because every bullet that's in there is going to funnel the fuck out here. Spend as little time as humanly possible in the fatal funnel. All right. Now, when we pie, more often than not, we're going to stay outside of the fatal funnel. All right. So we're not going to cross that threshold. We're going to stop short of it. What do you think would be a contributing factor in deciding if we're going to do what's known as a full pie or a full cross, meaning we're going to cross all the way across the opening? What do you think would be a big deciding factor in that?
Space is too tight for two people to do it from either side of the door.
Okay, you don't have room to get onto the other side of the door?
Correct.
What else? What do you guys think would be a deciding factor?
Teamwork, talking.
How likely a threat is to be in the room?
All right, yeah.
So like, I'm thinking like if you're passing in front of a doorway, but you're not planning on making entry into the room.
So if you're pieing it, you're making entry. So let's think about it this way, all right? We spend as little time as humanly possible in what?
Fatal funnel.
Fatal funnel.
Fatal funnel, okay? What dictates the size of the fatal funnel?
Size of the room.
Size of the door, right? Size of your entry point. So, say for example, we're going to make entry into a kind of traditional residential house. Anybody know the size of a normal entry door in a residential home?
3.5 feet.
3 feet.
3 feet, 36 inches. Right, that's your average entry door size, 36 inches. Cover 3 feet pretty damn quickly. And you can get across a 3 foot gap. Fuck, you can fall across a 3 foot gap. Now, let's say first we had to make entry into the walled compound that house is in. And that walled compound has 2 6 foot gates out front that we have to make entry through. Think you can cross 12 feet as quickly as you can cross 3 feet?
No, for Sergeant.
No,
No,
Sergeant.
No. All right. So you think I'm going to do a full pie or a full cross on a 12-foot opening?
No.
No,
No,
for
for
Sergeant.
Sergeant.
No, for Sergeant.
No. That's way too much time I'm going to be spending out there in the open. Now, what about a 3-foot opening? You think I could get away with getting fully across that?
Yes, for
Yes,
Sergeant.
Yes, for
Yes, for
Sergeant.
Sergeant.
Yeah, probably. Now, if I'm pieing and I get to here and there's a shooter in that corner, you think I'm going to continue pushing myself out into that funnel?
No, for Sergeant.
No, for
No, for
You're
Sergeant.
gonna shoot. I think you're gonna shoot while moving back to your wall, where you came from.
Right. So I'm not going to push further out in the open, right? That's just making the enemy's job easier for him. Now, why would I move back while I'm engaged in Shendy?
So you get
So you
cover.
become harder target for him, and also you get your body in cover.
All right, get yourself to cover. Absolutely. What's another reason that we would drop back and not get in that gunfight?
Decrease the fatal funnel area.
Because now he's watching the door.
We
Yeah.
could use grenades, Sergeant.
Yeah. I want you guys to think back to day one when we were over on the rifle range. Did we fight fair?
No,
No,
sir.
Sergeant.
Sergeant.
Thank you for the promotion. Not a sir. We don't fight fair. Our goal is to never fight fair. So you think I'm going to stand out here like Wyatt fucking Earp and get in a one-on-one gunfight?
No, for
No,
sure.
No, for Sergeant.
Fuck no. There's somebody in there with an AK-47. Me and 3 of my buddies are about to go in there and fuck up his life plans. I'm not going to stand out here and get in a one-on-one gunfight. That's just making his job easier for him. We're going to throw a grenade in there, and then me and my buddies are going to go in and fuck everything up. Don't get drawn into a one-on-one gunfight. Even if you drop the shooter, in my book, you already fucking lost because you were dumb enough to get drawn into that fight. Don't sit out here and get in a fight. You see a shooter in a room, engage while you are moving back to cover. Is everybody clear on that?
Yes,
Yes,
for
sir.
Sergeant.
Sergeant.
All right. So, point man approaches the entry point. He pies it. He drops back to his entry wall. He's then going to relay any relative information to his element. So he's going to let him know, hey, we got opening left or, staircase front, whatever it may be. Just give guys a basic lay of the room as best he can from what he's seen. Obviously, if there's a shooter in the room, he's going to relay that. Hey, we got a shooter deep left. Lets guys know he's back up against the far wall, left side of the room, so on. He's going to relay all that information. Then either himself or the stack leader, the number 2, is going to call for a grenade if needed. All right, obviously, as we talked about on day 1, we favor flashbangs in terms of throwing munitions in close quarters. We're going to favor throwing a flashbang in there. If we don't have any flashbangs or the threat is too high that the flashbang will not be effective, the guy's got to hide or something like that he can get behind, then we'll lead with a frag. But either way, if a grenade is needed, it'll be called for. Who do you guys think is going to throw that grenade into the room?
Point
Point
man.
man.
I think the second man.
Why do you think the point man's going to throw it?
He's close
Minimize the
to
chance of a bad frag.
All right.
close to
Andy,
the
why do you
doorway.
think number 2 is going to throw it?
Maybe because he's gonna be too exposed for throwing the flash. He needs somebody to cover him while he just throw it and get back to cover.
All right. So these guys over here on the other side of the wall, we're going to imagine that they're getting ready to make entry into this building. They'd be set up pretty much the exact same way they are, with the exception to last man would be looking direct rear. What do you think that point man is doing right now? If they're getting ready to make entry, he's already pied it, he's relayed information. What do you think he's now doing?
I think he's covering the 12 o'clock.
Yeah, he's covering the threshold so that if nobody comes out and tries to get at him for certain.
There you go. He's holding security on the entry point. Make sure nobody comes out that door while they're preparing to make entry. So what happens if he throws the grenade?
He has to lower his weapon.
He has to drop security. We don't drop security on an entry point. Number 2 is going to step out of the stack, pie the door much like number 1 did. He's going to be the one to throw the grenade so that number 1 can maintain security. So even if while number 2 steps out, somebody tries coming out that door, number 1's going to basically stick his barrel in his mouth and pull the trigger. He never drops security. Right? Make sense to everybody?
Yes,
Yes,
for
for
Sergeant.
Sergeant.
Yes, for Sergeant.
Yes, for Sergeant.
All right. So 1 pies it, drops back, relays relative information, calls for a grenade if need be. But what do you guys notice about the guys next to us here? What do you notice about Point Man and where he is in relation to the door?
2 feet off.
A couple feet off the threshold, right? Now, why would he do that?
So the profile of his gun doesn't show?
And
Right.
it's time to react if someone comes out.
Yeah, somewhat. Gives him a little bit of time to react. Primarily, if I go over here, if you guys were inside the room, and I set up over here like this, Think you guys are gonna know I'm outside getting ready to come in?
Yes, First Sergeant.
All right. It's what we call over penetration or flagging a threshold. Basically, it's just putting out a flag saying, hey, here the fuck I am. Get ready to shoot me because I'm coming. Stay a few feet back off the entry point. So, again, go through the piling process as the point man. He drops back. Everybody's going to set up the stack. All right, the stack is where all 4 guys stack up. Then they're going to call their sets. So 1 set, 2 set, 3 set, last man set. Now, why would he say last man set?
There might be more than just 4 people breaching or entering.
Right. You got to know who the last guy in the stack is. You could be going in with 4 guys. You could be going in with 10 guys. You could be going in with 2. You have to know who the last guy in the stack is. So whoever's the last guy going in the room calls last man set. Now, if that point man drops back from that pie and calls short room, that's a verbal cue to everybody in the stack that 1 and 2 are the only guys going in. 90% of the buildings that we clear in Arma are not big enough to justify a full 4-man element going into. 2 guys can clear them out perfectly fine. So point man drops back, says short room, 1 set. What's number 2 going to say?
Last man set.
Why is he saying last man set?
He's the last
man in the
guy.
room.
He's the last guy going in because point man said short room. Only 2 guys are going in. 1 set, last man set. They're good. All right. But once the sets are called, once last man set is called, number 2 is going to call breach. Now that is, nobody's going to fucking start hauling ass into the room or anything like that. He says breach solely if 3 and 4 are going in, or 5, 6, however many guys it may be. He calls breach as a verbal cue to them to drop their outward security and turn forward and get ready to go, because now it's on the point man. So as soon as that number 2 says breach, face yourself fucking forward and get ready to go. Once number 1 hears breach, he's then going to call breaching. He'll pause for a quick second. He'll call the direction he's going, pause for a quick second, and then he'll go. So it'll sound like breaching, going right, and then he'll go. Now, we do all those verbal cues and all the pauses and stuff purely for gameplay shit. Right? In reality, especially if you have a known shooter inside of a building, you're not fucking saying anything. You're using hand signals, taps, so on and so forth. We can't really do that in Arma reliably. So you're going to rely on verbal cues and so on.
First Sergeant.
Yep.
Private Heavy, in Arma, can the enemy combatants hear players?
Our Zeus operators can, but they are not allowed to react to it. Basically, they can't take advantage of the fact that you guys have to use verbal cues.
Thank you.
So, stack set, all the sets are called. 1 set, 2 set, 3 set, last man set. Breach, turn forward, breaching, direction they're going, and then they'll go in. All right, everybody clear on that process?
Yes, First Sergeant.
Yes, First Sergeant.
All right.
Sergeant Private Shandy here, got a question.
Send it.
When the point man just pretty much knows that he is gonna breach this compound or this gate, would he just say that 1 set before he pie his corner, or just pie the corner, make sure it's clear, then say 1 set?
Always pie it first. You do not call, nobody calls set until they are ready to make entry.
Got that, First Sergeant, thank you.
All right. What I want you guys to do now, go ahead and step inside the little room here, put yourselves up against the far wall, and look back out here towards the entry point. All right. If I'm the point man, right, we'll say I'll take this guy's place over here. I'm the point man. I pied it out. So on, got to look over there, drop back. Now it's time to make entry. I call breaching. What direction do you guys think I'm going to go when I make entry into here?
To the right.
To your left.
Over here?
Yes, First Sergeant.
Why would I go over there?
Because you already pied your right section, so you got enough information to get you secured. So you always push to your less information section.
All right. So I've got the most information about the right-hand side of the room. Left side's a bigger threat. I don't know what's over there. Okay. So What about this side? Anybody think I would move over there?
No, First Sergeant.
No, First Sergeant.
Why
Being
not?
the second man.
There could be a guy hiding on your left corner, close.
There could
That
also
you
be a
wouldn't
guy
have
in the
cut
right
the pipe
corner.
for.
Right. There could be a guy in any corner. Either one of those near corners. It's what we call the cut. Cut being the hard left and hard right on an entry point. There could be a guy in either one of those cuts. But it's most likely, if I pied from this side, he's going to have to stuff himself up in that corner pretty hard for me not to see him, unless it's a really long entry wall. Obviously, the longer the wall, the better the angle is going to be for him to hide. So, what about this? Have you guys ever heard of the phrase path of least resistance when it comes to making entry into a building?
Yes, First Sergeant.
Yes, First Sergeant.
What do you guys think that means, path of least resistance?
Go where you know there isn't a bad guy.
Well, there's less obstacles in your way, or you're naturally moving that way.
Right. It makes it easier for you to move in that direction. Right. We move to an area where we know there's not an enemy. That's just increasing our likelihood of getting shot in the back of the head, or our buddy that's number 2 getting shot in the fucking face. But say there was a door on this room and it opened in into your guys' left. It'd make it pretty fucking hard for me to go over into this corner, right? I'd be running into a fucking door as number 1. And you spend as little time in this area as humanly fucking possible. So if I'm dicking around, fumble fucking a doorknob trying to get unhooked from it, and number 2 comes rushing in behind me, now we got a clusterfuck at the door. We're all getting fucked up. So we follow the path of least resistance as the point man. That makes sense to everybody?
Yes,
First
Yes,
Sergeant.
First
Yes, First
Sergeant.
Sergeant.
Now, if there is no resistance, if it's just set up like this, at the end of the day, it's dealer's choice. If you want to go on and go right, you take that chance to fuck you and your buddy. You want to go on and go left, take that chance. It's up to that point man. And you hope that that point man knows what the fuck he's doing, especially if you're number 2, right? So as soon as he goes, when he says breaching going left, if I'm over here and I say breaching going left and I button hook around this corner, where do you think number 2 is going to go?
Right.
You're
First
right.
hook, right?
Right. He's going to go opposite direction. Okay. So you guys ever heard the phrase 2 in fast, make them hesitate?
No, First Sergeant.
No, First Sergeant.
So
No, First Sergeant.
that phrase is one that we use specifically when talking about making entry into an occupied room or building. 2 in fast, make them hesitate is basically put more targets in front of a shooter than he can actively engage. Right. You guys think back to day 2, we talked about 3-second rush, right? I'm up, he sees me, I'm down, takes an average of 3 seconds to accurately engage a human-sized target. That time is lessened in close quarters. Okay, it's not going to take you 3 seconds to accurately engage a guy that's 10 feet away from you. So we put more bodies in the room than he can accurately engage. So when that number 1 comes in, he realizes that's a target, starts tracking him, goes to engage. By the time he's going to engage, 2, 3, and 4 are already in the room, hopefully shooting him in the fucking face, or somebody's shooting him. So when number 1 goes, 2, 3, and 4 got to be Johnny on the fucking spot right behind him and get into that room as quickly as possible. That makes sense to everybody?
Yes, First Sergeant.
Yes, First Sergeant.
Yes, First Sergeant.
Okay. So number 1 and number 2 go opposite directions. 1 and 2 are what we call the corner guys. Okay. So if I'm 1, I come in, button hook. My first area of responsibility is clearing this near corner, the cut. Okay. So I'm going to come in. My primary sweep is going to be near corner, far corner, center of the room while I'm moving down my entry wall. Okay. Again, near corner, far corner, center of the room. Number 2 is doing the same thing over on this side. As soon as he comes in, he checks the cut, near, far, center. That's your primary sweep. 1 and 2 are then going to do a secondary sweep from center of the room back to the far corner. That secondary sweep, not so much used in buildings in Arma because we don't have, couches and shit like that for people to, potentially be behind, so on. We'll more so use it for compounds. We go into a walled compound. Maybe there's a 2-3 story building in that compound. That's where we'll check windows and balconies and rooftops and shit like that. Just a good, clear second sweep across that area to make sure we didn't miss anything in the primary sweep. And then we'll hold security on that far corner as 1 and 2. 3 and 4 obviously coming in after 1 and 2. 3 is going to follow 1. 4 is going to follow 2. So if I'm 3, I'm going to come in right behind number 1 on the same part of the wall, same part of the entry wall. Okay. What do you think my first sector of responsibility is going to be as number 3?
Center and far. Corner.
Center, yeah,
Center and far?
Center to near.
Center to near?
So center, far, near.
Well,
Okay, so I'm going to center
corner.
far near.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I look at the near corner?
One's already looking.
One's already there. Right. One comes in, clears the near corner, and pushes down the wall into that near corner. If I'm 3 and I come in and I look at that near corner, what am I now doing?
Flagging your battle buddy for certain.
Flagging, right? I'm not going to point my fucking gun at the side of my buddy's head. So I'm going to basically shadow what he did. 3 and 4 are going to come in, far corner, center of the room, and then hold. Now, why would they hold on the center of the room?
They locked on the room.
Maybe there is another room or another entry, staircase.
You guys are putting too much thought into it.
You're not pointing your rifle at the other
No.
soldiers.
Where's 1 and 2 looking?
Down the wall.
Far corner, right?
Yep.
So what's not being covered if 1 and 2 are looking down to the far corner?
Center of the room.
Center of the room. So 3 and 4 cover the center of the room. That also gives them overlapping fields of fire with each other and interlocking fields of fire with the corner guy opposite of them. So if I'm number 3 over here and I'm covering center of the room, not only do I have overlapping fields of fire with 4 who's across the entry point with me, but I have an interlocking field of fire with 2 who's over in the other near corner, who's covering that far corner. You guys tracking on all this so far?
Yes, for certain.
Yes, for Sergeant.
Yes, for Sergeant.
So basically all about having locking fields of fire, know where in that area can a threat present itself and not be engaged by multiple weapons. Okay. So we know 1 and 2 are our corner guys. They come in near, far, center, far. They push down to the near corner, holding that corner. 3 and 4 are going to come in, far, center, hold, and they're going to push roughly midway down the entry wall. All right, you got 3 types of walls in a room: entry wall, long wall, far wall. So they're going to push midway down the entry wall, generally about 6 feet or so at most off the entry point, and then hold there. They're not going to push all the way down the corner and be right on top of their buddy. Nobody comes off of the entry wall for any fucking reason until told otherwise. Stick to your fucking entry wall. Cindy, question.
Thank you, First Sergeant. Which is the better stance system for clearing a room? There is a normal walk and a slow walk. Which one is the better?
You're talking about the difference between combat pace and walking pace. Okay, so basically what we're talking about here is going from this. Okay, this is combat pace. This is what I tell you guys to move in a high threat environment, right? Everybody remember that? Rule number 3?
Yes, for certain.
Okay, so then this is a walking pace. Okay, so in terms of which one is better, there's no per se better. It's up to the point man. At the end of the day, 99% of the time, point man's going to be going in that room in combat pace, so we can clear that threshold as quickly as possible. Walking, much more likely to get shot while you're in the funnel. Then it's a whole shit show of guys trying to get you out of the funnel, find a secondary entry point so they're not going right in the same door the enemy's already looking at, so on and so forth. So vast majority of the time, guys are going to go in combat pace. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, for Sergeant.
Yes, for Sergeant.
All right. So make entry. Everybody's along their entry wall. Don't ever leave the entry wall until you're told otherwise. All right. Corner guys, call the room or call the side clear and then call the room clear. All right, you guys have probably heard that before. Somebody saying left clear, right clear, right? Everybody heard that before?
Yes,
Yes, Sergeant.
All right. So traditionally, that's the corner guys. Reason it's the corner guys is because 1 and 2, the corner guys, they're the only ones that do a primary and a secondary sweep. All right. 3 and 4, they only do a primary sweep. 1 and 2 are really the ones doing all the heavy lifting. They technically clear the entire fucking room themselves. So 1 will call his side clear, 2 will call his side clear. Whoever calls their side clear last calls the room clear. So if it's left clear, right clear, guy on the right calls room clear. Now, what if the room's not clear? What if there is a hide? And again, in rooms, not all that common, but if we're in a walled compound, maybe there's a stack of bricks or a truck or something like that that somebody can hide behind. Instead of calling room clear, he's going to come across with an order. He'll say push. Push means that 1 and 2 are now going to push up the long walls. 3 and 4 are going to push down the entry wall to the near corner and then follow up the long wall with 1 and 2. There is a little bit more advanced way of doing it where everybody pushes on line with each other, basically shoulder to shoulder and just move direct forward, but that's somewhat of a pain in the dick to do in Arma, so just follow your walls, all right? So left clear, right clear, push. Everybody's going to start pushing forward, get onto the backside and clear that hide, all right? Any questions on any of that?
No, for Sergeant.
No, First Sergeant.
No, for Sergeant.
Okay. So, gone over a lot of shit already. We got just a little bit of shit to go over here. But in terms of making entry on a room like this, what we call a central fed or a center fed room, does anybody have any questions on anything?
No,
No, First Sergeant.
No, for Sergeant.
No, for Sergeant.
All right, follow me.
Oh.
All right, same gig. Go ahead and head inside and put yourselves up against the far wall there. All right, so this room is what we would consider a corner-fed room. It's not necessarily your traditional corner-fed room. Generally, a legitimate corner-fed room is going to have the entry point right in the corner here. But this is still somewhat serves the purpose. So in a corner-fed room, obviously, if we're over here on this side, making entry from over here, we can't stack up 2 guys over on this little short entry wall, right? Everybody would agree with that? You don't want 2 guys sitting right there?
Yes, First Sergeant.
Yes, First Sergeant.
Okay. So if we call short room to let everybody know that, hey, we only need 2 guys going in, what do you think would be the verbal cue if we have one side that 2 guys can't stack on?
Short side.
Short side? Close. What is it? It's an entry.
Short stack. Short entry.
This is called what? An entry what?
Wall.
Wall. Okay.
Short
so
wall.
if the entry wall is short, it's a
Short wall.
short
Entry
wall. Okay. So that means point man, if he pies it, he can see this right side and obviously see that it's a short wall. He can fucking call back to the guys, we got a short wall right. And that lets the guys going right know, hey, we're not going to be able to stack both guys over on that right side. So what does that actually mean for them? Well, if I'm point man in this situation, generally I'm going to be going left here because obviously I have a very good fucking look on the right-hand side of the room. Very unlikely that somebody's going to be able to stuff themselves up in that corner. So I'm going to go left. When I go in and go left, I'm not necessarily going to push all the way down to this near corner. Okay. I'm going to push midway down the entry wall. Number 2 is going to do the same thing over on the other side. He's still going to clear this near corner, but then he's going to spin and go just like this and stop midway down the wall on this side. This now kind of becomes the entry wall. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes, First Sergeant.
Yes, for Sergeant.
So 3 still does the same gig, follows 1 over there, and then 4 can just stuff himself into this little corner here. Now, obviously in a traditional corner-fed room, where the entry point would be right here in the corner, he's not going to have this little bit of wall here to stuff himself on, so he'll push down the wall over here a little bit. But at the end of the day, I know it can sound very confusing of, okay, this guy fucking stops here on the wall, this guy stops here, all right, this guy has to go over in this corner, so on and so forth. It's not very complicated, guys. It's all about angles, okay? Make sure your barrel is pointed in a direction where somebody else's barrel isn't, and make sure it's not pointed at a friendly. It's that fucking simple. Cover a sector that somebody else isn't covering, and don't point your barrel at a friendly, and you're pretty much good to go. Does that make sense?
Yes, First Sergeant.
Yes, First Sergeant.
All right. Now, normally we would have you guys run a couple of drills on this to get some practice, making some entry and stuff. I'm not going to make you guys do that today because we've already been at it for a long fucking time because we got a little bit of a late start. All right. So we're going to wrap it up here. But before we do, this is the point in time. You guys got a question, tiniest little thing tickling in the back of your fucking gray matter on any of this. This is the time to ask. All right. So does anybody have any questions on anything?
Yes, First Sergeant.
Who's yes?
Cindy.
Send it.
So this wall is the entry wall.
In a corner-fed room.
This is the entry wall, and this is the wall, or I call it the short wall. This room, right?
In this situation, this would still technically be the long wall because your entry wall is here. But because it's such a short entry wall, this entire L section here would basically be an entry wall. In a traditional corner-fed room, you wouldn't have that little panel there. So this entire piece over here would be your entry wall for the team going right. That makes sense?
Yes, First Sergeant.
Riglin, go ahead.
All right. So, what if there was a window right here, and it was a corner fed, and the door was right here? So how would you stack on that that door?
So we'll say if we were technically outside of a building right now, and that was our entry point, and say we had a window right up against this wall right here. All right, we'll say it's 4 feet off the fucking entry point. So how would we stack up against that? Well, we'd have point man still holding security on this, and then number 2, or whoever's closest to that entry point, is going to be spun around covering inside of that window. So he's going to cover that window or that threshold just like the point man is going to cover the entry point. He's going to maintain security on that. Now, the reason he's able to do that, the reason he's going to be able to stand in that window and hold security is because when the point man approaches that entry point, first he's going to see that window and he's going to pie that fucking window before he ever even approaches the door. So him pieing that out and going fully across the window and making sure there's nobody already looking out that window is going to make it safe for number 2 to get up in there, get his rifle set up in the window. Then if a target does pop up in the window, he can drop it. That makes sense?
Yep.
All right. Anybody else got any questions?
Yes, for Sergeant. Private Volk.
Go ahead.
Thank you, First Sergeant. Would you be able to just quickly repeat the sequence of communication between team members going on when, from the moment they approach doorway that they want to breach to the moment that number or the point man breaches?
Yep. I'll say it again, and the only reason I'm not dropping a mortar on your nutsack right now is because of your proximity to me. Stop fucking saying repeat. So we go to make entry. Point man is going to pie the threshold. Okay. We stop short of that threshold, or we do a full cross, completely dependent upon the situation. He drops back, relays all relative information. What is relative information? Well, if you as a point man deem it relative to the rest of the guys going in, then fucking tell them about it. All right. Got to use some common sense there. Once he relays that information, then it'll be decided whether thrown munitions are going to be used or if you're just going to make normal entry. If thrown munitions are going to be used, then 1's going to call for it or 2's going to call for it. 2's going to step out of the stack. He'll call either frag out or flash out, depending upon what he's throwing. He'll throw it in, drop back into the stack. And then once that grenade goes off, everybody's going to go. So you're not going to go through the whole, breaching, so on and so forth. You're going to skip that, right? Once he drops back, relays information, everybody's going to call their sets. 1, 2, 3, last man set, frag out, throw it, bang, you're going. All the point man's going to say is breaching going left, and he's going to go. If thrown munitions are not going to be used, then same thing. He's going to drop back, relay relative information, call your sets. 2's going to say breach. What does it mean for 3 and 4 when 2 says breach? Come on, somebody tell me.
They're ready.
What's
They
3
get
and
their
4
guns
going to do?
back up
We're gonna
front.
drop security and face forward.
There you go. All right. So 2 says breach. 3 and 4 drop security, face forward. Point man's going to say breaching, pause, direction he's going, pause, and then he'll go. Everybody follows him in. All right. We clear on that process?
Yes, for Sergeant.
Yes,
Thank
for
you.
Sergeant.
All right, Duffy.
So in many cases, there's a stair near the entranceway in many buildings. This may be more advanced, but I've been told to hold the stair while others are breaching. Can you give us just a couple of words about that, please?
You talking about stairs outside of the building or a staircase when you go into a building?
Staircase inside the building, for Sergeant.
Staircase inside of the building is going to be whoever is first person to that staircase, which is generally going to be your number one or your number two guy, whoever's going on that side where the staircase is. They're going to maintain security on that staircase, and then whoever else is on their side, so say it's number two that picks up the staircase, then that means number four, who's going to be on his side, is going to pick up his sector. Right, that's the kind of the beauty of having four guys or even more guys going into a building, is if somebody has to pick up another sector that isn't kind of traditionally planned on, you got an extra guy to pick up that black, if you will. Make sense?
Understood. Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you, for Sergeant.
Now, one of the things you guys will hear a lot when we're dealing with staircases and stuff like that, and now in reality, you tend to go up staircases shoulder to shoulder, one guy facing forward, one guy facing rear to cover any landings or railings or shit like that on the back side of the stairs. Can't really do that in Arma all that well for the most part. But what'll happen oftentimes is as soon as another guy gets set and ready to go on that staircase, generally just two guys will go up a staircase, you'll hear the number two guy just say "on you," and that's just letting number one go, no, hey, movement is on you. As soon as you start moving, I'm here, I'm with you, let's go. So if you're sitting there covering a staircase and you just hear somebody say "on you" from behind, that means you're ready to go. Just say push and go, and they'll be with you. Shandy, go ahead.
Thank you, First Sergeant. Why not, I'm just wondering, why not the AR is not the point man, since he got the most dangerous weapon in the fire team?
The reason traditionally that the AR is not the point man, which, yes, at the end of the day, the guy's got a belt-fed fucking light machine gun. He's great for clearing rooms. The reason traditionally the point man is not the AR is because the rifleman and the grenadier are your natural buddy team within a fire team. All right. So you put him 1 and 3. That means 1 and 3 go the same direction. Rifle and grenadier are together. Team leader and AR are together on the other side. Team leader is number 2 so that he can use thrown munitions. Now, like I said, that's not that big of a deal. If AR wants to go on point, put the AR on point. If team leader wants to be number 4, then let the team leader go as number 4. It's not that big of a deal, especially considering with your fire team, you're going to be training together all the fucking time. You're going to be comfortable with them. It doesn't really matter whether you're with your actual battle buddy or with somebody else from your team or somebody else from your squad or even somebody from a completely different fucking element. There may be a time where you'll go to make entry into a room and I'll be the one as your number 2 as the fucking task force commander. And I'll be your number 2 going into a fucking room. It doesn't matter because we all make entry and clear the exact same way. So, end of the day, doesn't matter. Whoever the fuck's on point is on point. All right. Last call. Anybody got anything else? All right. We're going to wrap it up there. Right. Been a long fucking day. Okay. Tomorrow's a big day for you guys. You got your FTX. We'll get that done. Debrief after it, and then we'll move on to your quiz. Hopefully you guys will graduate tomorrow. All right. Get the hell out of here. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
Thank you, First Sergeant.
Thank you, First Sergeant.
First Sergeant.
Thank you, First Sergeant. Thanks, Sergeant.